For 15 years, I was never explicitly banned from Christmas. I was simply perfectly forgotten. There were no shouting matches, just an empty chair nobody mentioned. Then, I inherited the lakeside lodge my family treated as their holiday shrine. I stayed silent for 11 months, letting them walk into a trap built of their own assumptions. On December 24th, they arrived like always, but this time, the door did not open to welcome them. My name is Juno Banks. I am 34 years old, and I live in a quiet, sensible apartment in Knoxville, Tennessee, where the walls are painted a neutral dove gray and the heating bill is always manageable. By day, I am a financial manager at the Blue Ridge Ledger Group. My job is to make things balance. I look for discrepancies. I track where the money goes, and I ensure that the numbers at the bottom of the page tell the truth, even if the people spending the money would prefer a comfortable lie. I am very good at my job because I have spent half my life analyzing a deficit that can never be paid back. It is 7 p.m. on December 24th. In the rest of the world, or at least in the Hallmark movies that flicker on my television screen with the volume turned down low. This is the magic hour. This is when the prodigal daughter returns, shaking snow off her coat, to be embraced by a mother smelling of cinnamon and a father whose eyes crinkle with warmth. In my apartment, the only scent is the metallic tang of a microwave lasagna that is currently spinning on its glass turntable. I am wearing flannel pajama pants that I bought for myself on clearance in March. I am not shaking snow off a coat because I haven't left my house in 2 days. I am alone. This is not a tragedy. It is a routine. It is a scheduled programming event that has run for 15 consecutive seasons without cancellation. While I wait for the microwave to beep, I unlock my phone. I know I shouldn't. My therapist, back when I could still stomach the pity in her eyes, told me that checking social media on holidays was a form of self-harm. Like picking at a scab to see if it will still bleed, but I do it anyway. I open Instagram, and there it is. The feed is flooded. They are at Evergreen Harbor Lodge. Just seeing the name of the place makes my stomach tighten. It is not our family home. It is a sprawling, timber-framed luxury estate on the edge of a private lake about 3 hours east of here. It has a stone fireplace large enough to stand inside, vaulted ceilings that trap the heat of 100 candles, and a view of the water that looks like a painting commissioned by God. My parents and my extended family rent it every single year for the entire holiday week. It is their sanctuary. It is the holy ground of the Banks family tradition, and I am the ghost they exorcised from the premises. The photo on my screen was posted 11 minutes ago by my half-sister, Tessa. The caption reads, "Nothing beats the magic of the lodge. So grateful for this family. Tradition-blessed evergreen Christmas." I zoom in. There is the tree, a 12-foot monster decked in heirlooms. There is the long mahogany table, set for 16 people. There is my mother, Marilyn, looking impeccable in a cashmere sweater the color of heavy cream. Holding a glass of wine, there is Grant, my stepfather, laughing at something off camera. There are cousins, aunts, uncles. Everyone is wearing matching slate blue loungewear this year. They look cohesive. They look whole. There is no gap in the line where I should be. There is no empty chair at the table. The math of the photo is perfect. They have solved the equation of their happiness by removing the variable that didn't fit. It didn't start with malice. At least, that is what I told myself for the first decade. It started with a mistake. I was 19 the first time they forgot me. It was my sophomore year of college. I was sitting in my dorm room, surrounded by empty boxes, waiting for the call to tell me what time they were picking me up or where we were meeting. The call never came. When I finally called my mother at 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve, her voice was light, airy, and genuinely confused. "Oh, Juno, goodness, I thought you were going skiing with your roommates. Didn't you say something about Aspen back in October?" I hadn't. I didn't even ski. But she sounded so convinced, so flustered, that I ended up apologizing to her. I spent that Christmas eating a vending machine sandwich and watching a marathon of Law & Order. The next year, I was 20. I waited again, this time, when I called. Grant answered. "We thought you were working," he said, his voice mild and unbothered. "Your mom said you picked up a shift at the library." I had never worked a holiday shift in my life. The third year, I was 21. The excuse was a text message error. My mother claimed she had sent the invite weeks ago and was hurt, actually hurt, that I hadn't replied. She turned it around on me so effectively that I sent her flowers to apologize for a glitch in a cellular network that likely never happened. By the time I was 22, the pattern was set, but I was young and desperate, so I decided to break it. I decided to just show up. I remember that drive. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel of my beat-up Honda Civic. I had bought gifts. I had wrapped them in paper that matched the theme from the previous year's photos. I convinced myself that this was just a series of misunderstandings, that once I walked through those heavy oak doors of Evergreen Harbor Lodge, they would clap their hands to their faces and say, "Thank God you're here. It wasn't the same without you." I parked down the driveway so I wouldn't block the view. I walked up the snowy path, my boots crunching loudly in the silence. I could see them through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The fire was roaring. They were playing charades. I knocked. Tessa, who was 16 then, opened the door. Her smile dropped the second she saw me. It didn't turn into a frown. It just vanished into a blank, confused stare. "Mom," she called out over her shoulder, not stepping back to let me in. "Juno is here." The room went quiet. The chatter died. My mother walked into the foyer, holding a serving spoon. She didn't hug me. She stopped 3 feet away, looking at me with the same expression one might give a delivery driver who had arrived at the wrong house. "Juno," she said, "we weren't expecting you." "I wanted to surprise you," I said. My voice sounded thin, pathetic. "Well," she sighed, a small, tight sound that signaled inconvenience. "Come in, I suppose. We've just started dinner." I walked into the great room. The table was set for 14. There were 14 chairs. There were 14 place cards. There was absolutely nowhere for me to sit. For a distinct, agonizing minute, nobody moved. They just looked at me. My stepfather, Grant, looked at his plate. My cousins looked at each other. Finally, Grant stood up and dragged a backless wooden stool from the kitchen island to the corner of the table. "Here," he said. I sat on the stool. I was 6 inches lower than everyone else. I didn't have a matching napkin. I didn't have a wine glass. I sat there for 45 minutes, picking at a piece of ham they served me on a salad plate because they had run out of dinner plates. They talked over my head. They talked about stories I wasn't part of. They talked about the funny thing that happened yesterday when I wasn't there. I felt like a ghost who had accidentally materialized at a seance meant for someone else. I left before dessert. I told them I had a stomachache. Nobody argued. Nobody walked me to the car. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw them through the window, laughing again. The tension had left the room the moment I did. That was the last time I tried. After that night, I stopped fighting gravity. I let myself drift out of orbit. I stopped asking what time or where. I realized that if I didn't initiate the contact, the silence was absolute. I was removed from the family group chat without a notification. I just stopped receiving messages. I was not included in the email chains about the summer barbecue or the Thanksgiving potluck. I disappeared. And the truly devastating part, the part that keeps me awake on random Tuesdays in July, is how easy it was for them. It took 0 effort. It required no adjustment on their part. My absence was their natural state. The only person who ever reaches across the void is my great-aunt June. She is my grandmother's younger sister, a bird-like woman with nervous hands and a heart that means well but collapses under pressure. Every year, usually around December 20th, my phone buzzes, thinking of you. "Honey, hope you're doing well in the city. Miss you." That is it. She never says, "Come join us." She never says, "Why aren't you here?" She sends her guilt in a text message, waits for me to reply with a polite heart emoji, and then she washes her hands of it. She is terrified of conflict, and she is terrified of my mother. in the hierarchy of the Banks family. Comfort is the currency, and asking difficult questions is too expensive. So, I built a life that didn't require them. I focused on my career at Blue Ridge. I became the woman who stays late to close the month-end books. I became the friend who is always available to cat sit because she has no family obligations. I told my colleagues that I prefer a quiet Christmas to recharge. I constructed a persona of solitary independence so convincing that sometimes even I believe it. But the body remembers. Every year. As the calendar creeps toward December 24th, I feel the ache. It is a physical sensation, like a bruise on my ribs that never fully heals. It is the humiliation of that wooden stool. It is the realization that to the people who made me, I am optional. The microwave beeps, 3 loud, shrill tones. I pull the plastic film off my lasagna. Steam rises, smelling of preservatives and tomato paste. I carry it to the coffee table and sit down. On the television screen, a family is reconciling in a snowy airport. I mute them. I pick up my phone again. I open the folder I created 4 years ago. It is password protected and hidden from the main gallery. I call it the ledger. It contains screenshots, hundreds of them, every year. I save the photos. I save the captions. I save the check-ins at Evergreen Harbor Lodge. Year 12. Another perfect year at the lodge. Year 13. So lucky to have this tradition. Family is everything. Year 14. Grant grilling steaks by the lake. Best Christmas ever. I don't save them to wallow in self-pity. Not anymore. In the beginning. Yes, I stared at them and cried until my eyes were swollen shut. But somewhere around year 10, the tears stopped, and something colder took their place. I began to study the photos like a forensic accountant studies a fraudulent tax return. I noticed the details. I noticed that they always tag the location. I noticed the specific dates they arrived and left. I noticed the upgrades to the lodge that they bragged about in the comments. The new dock. The remodeled kitchen. Treating a rental property like it was their own inheritance. I realized that their entire identity as a perfect family was anchored to this specific building. Evergreen Harbor Lodge was the stage where they performed the play of their lives. Without the stage, the play would fall apart. I take a bite of the lasagna. It is burning hot, but I barely feel it. I swipe to the latest screenshot, the one from 11 minutes ago. My mother's smile is dazzling. She looks like a queen holding court. She has no idea that the daughter she forgot is currently sitting in a gray apartment 3 hours away, zooming in on the reflection in the window behind her. They think I am gone. They think I am a loose thread they successfully snipped off the hem of their lives. They think that because I am silent, I am accepting. But I am a financial manager. I know that eventually. Every debt comes due. I know that you can ignore a balance sheet for a long time, but you cannot ignore it forever. I close the folder. I lock the phone. I eat my dinner in the silence that they gifted me, and I wait. Because I know something they don't. The books are about to open. And for the first time in 15 years, I am the one holding the pen. To understand why I never just drove up to the gate again, you have to understand the specific architecture of the Banks family. We are not a family of screamers. We do not throw plates or have drunken brawls on the front lawn. If we were that kind of family, this would have been easier to fight. Violence is loud. You can record it. You can point to a bruise. But my mother, Marilyn, operates in a frequency that only dogs and unwanted daughters can hear. Marilyn Banks is a masterpiece of social performance. She is the woman who sends handwritten thank you notes for thank you notes. She is the neighbor who brings a casserole when someone dies. But the casserole is always gluten-free and vegan just in case. Even if the deceased was a butcher. Her control is absolute, but it is soft. It feels like being smothered by a very expensive, lavender-scented pillow. She does not tell you to shut up. She simply waits until you are speaking, then picks a piece of lint off your shoulder with such intense focus that everyone else stops listening to watch her. She effectively deletes your voice without ever opening her mouth. Then there is Grant, my stepfather. If Marilyn is the architect of my exclusion, Grant is the building inspector who signs off on the code violations because he wants to go home early. He is a man made entirely of beige cardigans and conflict avoidance. He loves the phrase, "let's not make a fuss," for years. I thought he was a victim of Marilyn's steamroller personality, just like me. I used to look at him with sympathy when she corrected his table manners in public. But I was wrong. Grant is not a victim. He is a collaborator. His passivity is a weapon. Every time I tried to bring up the holidays in the early years, Grant would offer a sad, helpless smile and say, "You know how your mother gets about the schedule. Let her decide." He abdicated his role as a parent to preserve his role as a comfortable husband. He saw a child being erased, and he chose to look at the wallpaper because the wallpaper didn't ask him to do anything difficult. And finally, there is Tessa. Tessa is 7 years younger than me. She is the biological product of the Marilyn and Grant merger. She is the golden child. Not because she is particularly brilliant or talented, but because she never, ever goes off script. Tessa loves the tradition. She consumes it. She is the one who started the hashtag for the family vacation. She is the one who coordinates the outfits. To Tessa, Evergreen Harbor Lodge is not a rental property. It is a birthright. She refers to it as our place in conversation. She talks about the owner, a man she has never met, as if he is a mere caretaker for her future estate. She has posted photos of herself on the dock every year since she was a teenager, documenting her growth against the backdrop of the lake. I have watched her grow up through these photos. I saw her get braces, get them off, go to prom, graduate college, and get engaged, all framed by the timber beams of that lodge, in her version of reality. I am not missing. I am just elsewhere. This is the most insidious part of the exclusion. It is not just that they don't invite me, it is that they have rewritten the story of why I am not there. I found this out 3 years ago when I ran into a cousin, Sarah, at a grocery store in Knoxville. Sarah is on Grant's side of the family, a distant relation who only shows up for the big events. "Juno," she said, looking genuinely surprised to see me buying almond milk. "I haven't seen you in ages. How are you?" "I'm fine," I said. "We missed you at the lodge last year," she said, and then she said the thing that stopped my heart. "But I know how much you value your downtime. Your mom always tells us how busy you are with your career and how you prefer to spend the holidays recharging alone. It's so brave of you to prioritize your mental health like that." I stood there, gripping the handle of the shopping cart until my knuckles turned white. "Is that what she says?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my insides were boiling. "Oh, totally," Sarah said, oblivious. "She says you're very modern and independent. She says you hate the chaos of big family gatherings. Honestly, I'm jealous. Sometimes I wish I could just skip it and stay home with a bottle of wine like you do." I walked away from that conversation feeling sick. Marilyn had not just locked me out. She had painted a portrait of me on the outside of the door. She had turned my forced isolation into a lifestyle choice. To the rest of the extended family, I wasn't the rejected stepdaughter. I was the aloof, career-obsessed workaholic who chose to reject them. It was brilliant. It absolved them of all guilt. Why would they feel bad about not inviting someone who allegedly hates coming? Why would they reach out to someone who supposedly wants to be left alone? Marilyn had turned my absence into a quirky personality trait. That was when the cold facts started to assemble themselves in my mind. I went home that day and looked at the photos again. I looked at the stage they had built. Evergreen Harbor Lodge is the perfect backdrop for this lie. It is rustic and expensive, which is the exact aesthetic my mother craves. It has a 20-foot Christmas tree in the Great Hall that requires a ladder to decorate, every year. There is a photo of Grant on that ladder, placing the star, every year. There is a photo of the long dining table, set with chargers and crystal glasses that they haul from home in padded boxes. They dress the set. They wear matching flannel pajamas on Christmas morning. Expensive ones, usually from LL Bean or similar brands. They bake cookies on the granite island. They arranged themselves on the leather sofas with mugs of cocoa, looking like a catalog for the American dream. I realized that I didn't fit the aesthetic. I have my father's dark eyes and his sharp chin. I have a tendency to be quiet in a way that isn't peaceful, but watchful. I am a reminder of a marriage my mother failed at, a genetic echo of a man she divorced and wants to forget. Tessa, with her blonde hair and soft features, fits the color palette of the lodge. I clash with the upholstery. So, I was edited out. Whatever film they were making about their lives, I ended up on the cutting room floor. But doubt is a persistent thing. Even knowing all of this, even seeing the lie Sarah had been fed, a tiny part of me thought, maybe I am crazy. Maybe if I just asked, plainly and clearly, it would stop. So, 2 years ago, I conducted a test. It was scientific. I removed the emotion and looked for data. It was November 15th. I waited until 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, a time when I knew Marilyn would be at her desk handling her Charity League emails. I sent a text. Hey, Mom, I have some vacation time this December. I'd love to join you and Grant and Tessa at the lodge this year. Let me know the dates and what I can bring. I stared at the screen. The delivered receipt appeared instantly. I waited. 1 hour, 2 hours. Marilyn is a woman who lives on her phone. She responds to texts from her hairstylist within 30 seconds. 4 hours passed. Finally, at 7 that evening, my phone buzzed. Hi, Juno. We didn't think you'd be interested since you're usually so busy with work this time of year. We're already packed tight with your aunt's family staying in the guest wing. But you can come if you want. I read that message 10 times. You can come if you want. It sounds permissible. It sounds like a yes. But look closer. There were no dates. There was no address. There was no gate code. The lodge is in a gated community. There was no offer of a bed. Packed tight. There was no, we'd love to see you. It was a non-invitation. It was a challenge. She was telling me that if I wanted to come, I would have to fight for it. I would have to ask for the code. I would have to ask where I would sleep. I would have to ask what time dinner was. I would have to force my way in, creating friction at every step, so that by the time I arrived, I would be the aggressor. I would be the one inconveniencing them. I would be the one sleeping on a sofa, making everyone tiptoe around me. She knew I wouldn't do it. She banked on my pride. She knew I would rather freeze to death than beg for a sleeping bag on the floor of a house they were renting with my stepfather's bonus money. She was right. I didn't reply, and she didn't follow up. The next day, she posted a countdown on Facebook. 30 days until our family paradise, counting down the minutes. That was the moment the sadness finally evaporated, leaving only a hard, crystallized clarity behind. This was not forgetfulness. You forget your keys. You forget to buy milk. You do not forget a human being for 15 consecutive years unless you are trying to. It was a system. It was a complex, self-sustaining ecosystem designed to keep the air pure for them and toxic for me. Marilyn was the CEO. Grant was the silent partner, and Tessa was the PR department. They had built a wall, brick by brick, using silence as mortar. I stopped crying over the photos that year. I started printing them out. I started looking at the background of the images, not the people. I looked at the structure of the lodge itself. I looked at the wide wraparound porch. I looked at the double-height windows. I realized that they didn't actually own the lodge. They acted like they did, referring to my kitchen and my view, but they were just tenants. They were paying customers. And in the world of finance, where I live my life, tenants are temporary. Only owners remain. I didn't know then that fate was about to hand me the deed. But I knew one thing. I was done knocking on a door that was locked from the inside, if I was ever going to enter Evergreen Harbor Lodge again. I wouldn't be walking in as a guest. I would be walking in as something else entirely. I went back to work. I balanced the books for Blue Ridge. I saved my money. And I waited for the universe to make a mistake. It took 2 years. But the mistake finally happened. It didn't come from my mother. And it didn't come from Grant. It came from the one person in the family tree who had been watching the play from the balcony, silently taking notes on the cruelty of the actors. It came from my grandmother, Evelyn, and unlike the rest of them, she didn't deal in silence. She dealt in ink. The death of my grandmother, Evelyn Marlowe, did not arrive with a phone call. It arrived on a Tuesday morning in February, sandwiched between an advertisement for teeth whitening and a video of a golden retriever jumping into a pile of leaves. I was sitting at my desk at Blue Ridge Ledger Group, scrolling through my feed during a 5-minute coffee break. I saw a post from a second cousin, a woman I hadn't spoken to since I was 12. It was a photo of a black ribbon against a white background. The caption read, "Rest in peace. Aunt Evelyn, you were the matriarch of our hearts. The angels are lucky to have you. Funeral arrangements to follow." I stared at the screen. The coffee in my mouth turned to acid. My mother had not called me. My stepfather had not texted. My sister, the self-proclaimed keeper of family updates, had posted nothing. I called my mother immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I called Grant. Voicemail. I called the nursing home where my grandmother had been living for the last 2 years. The receptionist, a kind woman named Brenda, who knew me because I was the only one who visited on non-holidays, confirmed it. "She passed last night. Honey," Brenda said, her voice soft. "Your mother was here this morning to collect her things. I assumed she called you." "She must have forgotten," I said. The lie tasted like ash. The funeral was scheduled for 3 days later. I found the details not from my family, but by looking up the obituary in the local Chattanooga newspaper online. It listed the service for 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday at the St. Jude's Chapel. I took the day off work. I dressed in black, not the fashionable, slim-cut black my mother would wear, but a heavy wool coat and dark trousers. I drove 2 hours south to Chattanooga, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my fingers ached. I arrived at the chapel at 1:45, giving myself 15 minutes to find a seat in the back and compose myself. But when I pulled into the parking lot, it was empty. There were no hearses. There were no mourners milling about. There was only a groundskeeper sweeping leaves near the entrance. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I checked the screenshot of the obituary on my phone. 2 o'clock. I got out of the car and ran to the chapel doors. They were locked. I banged on the wood until the groundskeeper looked up and walked over. "Service is over, miss," he said, leaning on his broom. "Over?" I looked at my watch. "It's 1:50. The paper said 2. "Family changed it this morning," he said, shaking his head. "Moved it up to noon. Said something about a scheduling conflict with the reception venue. They all left about an hour ago." I stood there on the concrete steps, the wind whipping my hair across my face. They had moved the funeral, and they hadn't told me. "Did they say where they were going?" I asked. "Some country club, I reckon," he said. I didn't go to the reception. I couldn't. The thought of walking into a room full of people eating shrimp cocktails and drinking white wine, explaining that I had missed the burial of the only person who loved me because I wasn't on the distribution list, it was too much humiliation to bear. Instead, I drove to the cemetery. I found the fresh plot of dirt. I stood there for an hour, alone, talking to the ground. I told Evelyn I was sorry. I told her I missed her. And then I got back in my car and drove home to Knoxville. I didn't cry. I think I had forgotten how. 3 weeks passed. I returned to the rhythm of my life. I went to work. I paid my bills. I didn't contact my mother to ask why she hadn't told me about the time change. I knew the answer. She would say it was frantic, that she thought Grant told me, that it was a terrible oversight. She would make me comfort her for her mistake. I wasn't willing to play that game. Then, on a rainy Tuesday in March, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a Chattanooga area code. "This is Juno Banks," I answered, using my professional voice. "Ms. Banks," a man's voice replied. It was deep, gravelly, and sounded like it was coming from inside a library. "My name is Walter Price. I am the attorney representing the estate of the late Evelyn Marlowe." My heart skipped a beat. "Yes?" "I need you to come to my office," he said. "Tomorrow, if possible." "Is there a problem?" I asked. I know my mother is the executor. I'm sure whatever. Your mother is not the executor of the items I wish to discuss. Walter cut in. His tone was firm. And Ms. Banks? I must insist that you do not mention this meeting to your mother, or your stepfather, or anyone in your family. This is a private matter between you and the estate. A chill went down my spine. Secrets in my family were usually dangerous things. They were usually landmines waiting to be stepped on. Is it bad? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Did she leave debt? I will see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock, Walter said. Ignoring the question, he gave me an address in downtown Chattanooga and hung up. I spent the night staring at the ceiling. I imagined every worst-case scenario. Maybe my grandmother had secret gambling debts. Maybe she had committed a crime. Maybe she wanted me to take care of a cat I didn't know she had. The next morning, I drove to Chattanooga again. Walter Price's office was located in a pre-war limestone building that smelled of lemon polish and serious decisions. The waiting room had leather chairs that cost more than my car. The receptionist looked at me over her spectacles and buzzed me in immediately. Walter Price was a man in his 70s, wearing a suit that looked like it had been tailored in London in 1980 and kept in pristine condition ever since. He did not smile. He shook my hand, gestured for me to sit, and closed the heavy oak door. Thank you for coming, Juno, he said. He sat behind a desk cluttered with stacks of files. He pulled a single, thick manila envelope from a drawer and placed it in the center of the desk. Your grandmother was a very observant woman, Walter began. He laced his fingers together. She saw things. She didn't always say things, but she saw them. He pushed a smaller, white envelope across the desk toward me. It had my name on it in Evelyn's shaky, cursive handwriting. Read this first, he said. I opened the envelope. My hands were trembling. Inside was a single sheet of stationery. My dearest Juno, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are sitting in Walter's office looking terrified. Don't be. You have nothing to fear. I have watched you for 15 years. My darling, I have watched you stand on the outside. I have watched my own daughter, your mother, prune you from the family tree like a dead branch. I stayed silent too often. I thought that by keeping the peace, I was helping. I was wrong. Peace at the expense of justice is just a quiet war. You were the only one who came to visit me when I had nothing to give you. You came on Tuesdays when the weather was bad. You brought me magazines and sat by my bed when I couldn't speak. The others, they came when they needed signatures, or when they wanted to secure their standing. You came for me. So, I am leaving you the one thing that matters to them, not because I want you to be like them, but because I want you to have the power to decide who sits at your table. Be brave. And remember, possession is 9/10 of the law, but the other 1/10 is having the guts to change the locks. Love, Grandma. I lowered the letter. My eyes were burning, but I blinked the tears back. I don't understand, I said. What did she leave me? Mom said the house was going to Tessa, and the savings were split. Walter allowed a very small, very dry smile to touch his lips. Your mother is referring to the personal estate, the house in the suburbs, the jewelry, the checking account. Those are indeed going to Marilyn and Tessa. However, those assets are negligible compared to the trust. He opened the large manila envelope. He pulled out a deed. It was blue, with a gold seal at the bottom. Evelyn Marlowe was the sole proprietor of a holding company called Lakeside Ventures, LLC, Walter said. She formed it 20 years ago. I shook my head. I don't know what that is. Lakeside Ventures, LLC, Walter said, speaking slowly, is the legal entity that owns a property at 42 Evergreen Drive. I froze. The address. I knew that address. I had typed it into my GPS once. 15 years ago, on the night I was turned away. Evergreen Harbor Lodge? I whispered. Correct, Walter said. The room seemed to tilt sideways. But no, that's a rental. My family rents it. They have rented it every Christmas for 15 years. They pay, I don't know who they pay, but they pay a management company. They pay the management company, Walter corrected, and the management company deposits the profits into the account of Lakeside Ventures. Your grandmother bought the lodge 20 years ago as an investment. She used a management firm to handle the bookings so that she wouldn't have to deal with tenants directly. My brain was trying to reconfigure 15 years of history. Does my mother know? No, Walter said. Marilyn believes the lodge is owned by an absentee investor from Nashville. She has never met the owner. She deals exclusively with the property manager. He leaned forward. Your grandmother gave explicit instructions that the family was never to know she owned it. She enjoyed watching them. She told me once that she found it amusing how they treated a rental property like an ancestral manor, all while ignoring the actual ancestor who paid for the roof over their heads. I stared at the deed. The paper was heavy, expensive. And now? I asked. Now, Walter said. Lakeside Ventures belongs to you. You own the lodge, Juno, you own the land, you own the dock, you own the very chairs they sit on every Christmas Eve. I couldn't breathe. I thought of Tessa posting her photos, our place. I thought of Marilyn acting like the queen of the manor, criticizing the cleaning crew. They had been paying rent to my grandmother for years. And now, Walter, I said, my voice shaking. Does my mother know that I own it now? No one knows, Walter said. The transfer of the LLC is private. As far as the public record shows, the owner is still Lakeside Ventures. As far as the management company is concerned, there has just been a change in the beneficiary contact information. He sat back in his chair. The current lease agreement for the holiday week, let me check. He pulled out another paper. Ah, yes, your mother, Marilyn Banks, has a standing reservation for the week of December 21st to December 28th. She has not yet paid the deposit for this year. It is due in July. He looked at me over his glasses. You have options. Juno, you can sell the property. It is valued at over $2 million. You can continue to rent it to them and collect the check. Or, he let the sentence hang in the air. I looked at the letter from my grandmother again. The power to decide who sits at your table. I wasn't just inheriting a building. I was inheriting a trap that had already been set. All I had to do was wait for them to walk into it. Is the will contestable? I asked. The question came out sharp, sudden. It is ironclad, Walter assured me. We updated it 6 months ago. We included a no contest clause. If Marilyn tries to challenge the validity of the trust, she automatically forfeits her share of the smaller personal estate. She won't risk it. Your grandmother was very thorough. And the instructions? I asked. You said she left instructions. She did, Walter said. She advised that you do not announce your ownership immediately. She suggested that you observe. She thought you might want time to prepare. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the Chattanooga skyline. I thought about the funeral I had missed. I thought about the empty chair. I thought about the text message. You can come if you want. I turned back to Walter. I don't want to sell it, I said. And I don't want to tell them. Walter raised an eyebrow. So, business as usual? No, I said. Not usual. I want to keep the ownership silent. I want the management company to continue communicating with my mother as if nothing has changed. Let her book it. Let her plan the menu. Let her invite the guests. And then? Walter asked. And then? I said, feeling a cold, calm certainty settle over me. I'm going to follow my grandmother's advice. I'm going to change the locks. Walter Price didn't smile, but his eyes crinkled at the corners. He opened a folder. Very well. Ms. Banks, we have a lot of paperwork to sign. I hope you have the afternoon free. I have the rest of my life free, I said. I sat down and picked up the pen. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel like the girl waiting by the phone. I felt like the person holding the line. I signed my name. The ink was black and permanent. Juno Banks, the owner of Evergreen Harbor Lodge. The game had officially changed, and for the first time. I was the one making the rules. The hardest part of a secret is not keeping it. The hardest part is acting normal while you are holding a grenade with the pin pulled out. For the first few weeks after leaving Walter Price's office, I felt like I was vibrating at a different frequency than the rest of the world. I went to work at Blue Ridge Ledger Group. I sat in budget meetings. I nodded politely when my colleagues complained about the coffee or the humidity. But in my head, I was rearranging the geography of my entire life. I did not call my mother. I did not call Grant. I did not post a cryptic status update on social media about big changes coming or karma. I went dark. Silence, I discovered, is a very active verb. The legal transfer of Evergreen Harbor Lodge took 3 weeks to finalize. It was a blizzard of paperwork that Walter handled with surgical precision. We transferred the LLC into my name, but we kept the public-facing contact information routed through a blind post office box and a generic email address that Walter controlled. To the outside world, and specifically to the chatty real estate agents of Eastern Tennessee, the ownership of the property had simply shifted from one faceless investment group to another. I paid the transfer taxes. I paid the filing fees. I paid the retainer for the property management company to stay on. But with new, strict instructions: report everything to me. Do not disclose my identity to the tenants. For the next 11 months, I lived 2 lives. From 9 to 5, I was Juno Banks, the reliable, boring financial manager who ate salads at her desk and always had a lint roller in her purse. From 5:30 until midnight, I was a student of property law. I turned my guest bedroom into a war room. I bought a whiteboard. I printed out the Tennessee statutes regarding landlord-tenant relationships. I studied the laws on trespassing. I memorized the legal definition of constructive eviction versus right of possession. I needed to know exactly where the line was between being a property owner and being a harasser. Because I knew my mother would call the police the second things went wrong, I needed to be bulletproof. I learned that in the eyes of the law, a tradition is not a lease. I learned that 15 years of renting a place for 1 week a year does not grant you squatters' rights. I learned that unless your name is on the deed, your feelings about the wallpaper do not matter. And speaking of wallpaper, that was when the first true test of my patience arrived. It was mid-July. The heat in Knoxville was suffocating, a wet blanket that made the air shimmer off the asphalt. I was sitting on my couch with a glass of iced tea, reviewing the insurance policy for the lodge, when my phone pinged with an email from the property manager, a man named Rick, who thought I was just a savvy investor from out of state. Subject: tenant request/renovation approval needed ASAP. I opened the attachment. It was an email from Marilyn Banks. My stomach did a slow, cold roll. Seeing her name in my inbox usually meant a guilt trip or a request to pet sit. But this was an email sent to the management, written in her most charming, manipulative tone, to whom it may concern. My husband and I have been the loyal patrons of Evergreen Harbor Lodge for over 15 years. As you know, we treat this home as our own. We are planning our annual Christmas residency, and we have noticed that the hardwood floors in the great room are looking a bit tired, and the kitchen appliances are frankly outdated for the level of entertaining we do. We would like to propose an arrangement. We are willing to hire our own trusted contractor to refinish the floors and install a professional-grade wolf range and a sub-zero refrigerator. We will cover the costs of these upgrades entirely, as a gift to the house that means so much to us, provided we can lock in our reservation dates early and perhaps discuss a rate freeze for next year. Please let us know if we have permission to proceed. We would need to start work in September to be ready for the holidays. Sincerely, Marilyn and Grant Banks. I stared at the screen for a long time. The sheer entitlement was breathtaking. They didn't own a single nail in that house, yet they were offering to renovate it. They were so confident in their ownership of the tradition that they were willing to pour tens of thousands of dollars into a property that belonged to a stranger. My initial reaction was a flash of hot anger. No. I wanted to type, "You don't get to touch my floors. You don't get to change my kitchen." I started typing a furious refusal. Absolutely not. The property is fine as is. Then, I stopped. I looked at the whiteboard in my guest room. I looked at the timeline I had drawn. If I said no, They might get suspicious. They might start looking for another venue. They might wonder why the absentee owner suddenly cared about the floors. But if I said yes, I pulled up the calculator on my phone. Refinishing 2,000 square feet of white oak flooring, roughly $8,000. A wolf range, $10,000. A sub-zero fridge, another $12,000. They were offering to increase the value of my asset by $30,000. Out of their own pockets, 3 months before I kicked them out. A slow, dark smile spread across my face. It was the first time I had smiled about my family in a decade. I typed a reply to Rick. The manager, Rick, please inform the tenants that the ownership appreciates their dedication to maintaining the property. Approve the request. Let them pay for everything. Ensure that they sign a waiver stating that all fixtures and improvements become the permanent property of the landlord immediately upon installation, and that they seek no reimbursement. Make sure the liability insurance for the contractor is in their name, not ours. I hit send. 2 days later, Rick forwarded me the signed waiver. Marilyn had signed it with a flourish. She probably thought she had pulled a fast one on the stupid management company. She probably thought she was securing her territory. Marking the lodge with her scent like a wolf marking a tree, she was actually furnishing her own execution chamber. September came. The contractors moved in. I drove out to the lodge one Tuesday when I knew the crew would be there. I parked my car down the road and walked up through the woods. Watching from the tree line, I saw the trucks. I saw the workers hauling in the massive stainless steel refrigerator. I felt a strange sense of dissociation. That was my refrigerator. That was my floor being sanded, and my mother, who had once claimed she couldn't afford to help me with my college tuition because money is tight, was writing the checks. It wasn't just about the money, it was the symbolism. She was investing in a future she thought was guaranteed. She was building a nest. I let them finish. By late October, the work was done. Marilyn sent an email to the management company raving about how beautiful it looked. "We can't wait to break in the new kitchen," she wrote. "This is going to be our best Christmas yet." Now it was my turn. I waited until the first week of November. The lodge was empty, the renovation crew was gone, and the family wasn't due to arrive until December 23rd. I took 3 days off work. I drove to the lodge, but this time, I didn't park down the road. I punched the code into the gate, the code I controlled, and drove right up to the front door. Walking inside was surreal. The smell of fresh varnish hit me instantly. The floors gleamed under the afternoon sun. The kitchen looked like something out of a magazine. It was beautiful, and it was mine. I didn't sit down. I didn't make tea. I had work to do. I had hired a security specialist from Nashville, a guy named Mike, who asked 0 questions as long as the check cleared. He met me there at noon. "I want to upgrade the access control," I told him. "I want a smart lock system that I can control from my phone. I want to be able to lock and unlock every exterior door remotely, and I want to be able to revoke existing codes instantly." "Easy," Mike said. "And cameras," I added. "I want cameras at the front door, the back deck, and the driveway. High definition, cloud storage, real-time alerts." "You got trespasser problems?" Mike asked. "Drilling a hole into the door frame." "Something like that," I said. We spent 2 days installing the system. I tested it over and over. I stood outside in the cold air, tapped a button on my phone, and listened to the deadbolt slide home with a satisfying thunk. Locked. I tapped it again. Unlocked. It was the most empowering sound I had ever heard. For 15 years, the door to this family had been shut in my face. Now, I held the only key. I also did a walkthrough for safety. I checked the smoke detectors. I checked the fire extinguishers. I made sure there were no loose railings. I was not going to give them any legal loophole, any reason to claim the property was unsafe or that I was negligent. In the master bedroom, the room my mother always claimed, I stood for a moment. She had already shipped a box of her favorite scented candles here. They were sitting on the dresser, ready for her arrival. I didn't touch them. I didn't move a single thing. I wanted everything to be exactly where they expected it to be. I drove back to Knoxville with the digital keys in my pocket. November bled into December. The holiday music started playing in the grocery stores. The invitations to office parties started circulating, and then the inevitable social media parade began. On December 1st, Tessa posted a throwback photo of the lodge, counting down the days until we are back in our happy place. Mom says the new kitchen is to die for. Can't wait to bake cookies with the fam. I liked the post. It was the first time I had engaged with her content in years. 5 minutes later, Tessa texted me. Saw you liked the pic. Hope you're okay. Maybe we'll see you around town before we head up to the lake? She was fishing. She wanted to make sure I wasn't planning to crash their party. She wanted to verify that I was staying in my designated box. I texted back, I'm doing great. Tessa, very busy with work. Enjoy the lake. Enjoy the lake. It wasn't a lie. I wanted them to enjoy the anticipation. I wanted them to drive up that winding mountain road with their hearts full of expectation. I wanted them to unload their suitcases. I wanted them to reach for the door handle. I needed the disappointment to be fresh. I only spoke to Walter Price during those final weeks. We met for coffee once a week to review the strategy. You have the trespass notices? Walter asked, stirring 2 sugars into his latte. Printed and laminated, I said. You have the proof of ownership on your person? In my bag, always. And you have coordinated with law enforcement? My appointment with Officer Rourke is set for the morning of the 24th, I said. Walter looked at me. He had seen a lot of family disputes in his time, a lot of ugly divorces and bitter inheritance battles, but he seemed to treat this differently. He seemed to understand that this wasn't about the property. You know, Walter said gently, once you do this, Juno, there is no going back. They will never forgive you. I looked out the window at the holiday shoppers rushing past, their arms full of bags, their faces stressed but hopeful. They didn't forgive me for existing. Walter, I said, I'm just balancing the ledger. The date approached like a freight train. December 21st, December 22nd, on December 23rd, they would arrive. They would check in using the old key code, which I had left active, temporarily. I wanted them to get inside. I wanted them to unpack. I wanted them to sleep one night in the beds, to smell the pine air, to feel secure. I wanted them to think they had won. On the night of the 23rd, I sat in my apartment in the dark. I opened the security app on my phone. The camera feed from the driveway popped up. I saw Grant's SUV. I saw Tessa's convertible. I saw the lights on in the great room. I could even see the shadow of movement through the front window. My mother. Probably. Admiring her new floors. I watched them for an hour. They looked so happy. They looked so comfortable. I checked the time. It was 11 p.m. I navigated to the Access tab on the app. There was a list of active codes. Cleaner, maintenance, guest, banks. I stared at the guest code. With a single tap of my thumb, I deleted it. The screen refreshed. Access revoked. Then, I changed the master code. I set the alarm for 6 a.m. I didn't sleep well, but I didn't need to. Adrenaline is a powerful fuel. The next morning, December 24th, I put on my coat. I picked up the folder of documents. I walked out of my apartment and locked the door. I wasn't Juno, the forgotten daughter, anymore. I wasn't the ghost in the family photo. I was the landlord. And rent was due. The timeline of a disaster is rarely spontaneous. We like to think of explosions as sudden, violent bursts. But in my line of work, I know that an explosion is usually the final step in a very long, very quiet chemical reaction. My reaction began exactly 1 week before Christmas. It was December 17th. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the Blue Ridge Ledger Group, the engine idling to keep the heater running. I dialed the non-emergency number for the sheriff's department of the county where the lodge was located. I did not shake. My voice did not tremble. I had rehearsed this conversation in the shower, in the car, and in my dreams for 11 months. Sheriff's Department, this is dispatch, a woman's voice answered. Good morning, I said. My name is Juno Banks. I am the owner of the property located at 42 Evergreen Drive. I am calling to notify you of a potential trespassing situation that I anticipate occurring on December 24th. There was a pause on the line. Dispatchers are used to domestic disputes, noise complaints, and deer hitting windshields. They are rarely called to schedule a trespassing event in advance. You anticipate it, ma'am? She asked. Yes, I said. I have reason to believe that a group of individuals who do not hold a valid lease will attempt to occupy the premises. I will be on site to secure the property, but I would like to request an officer's presence to ensure that the removal process remains civil. I have all the ownership documentation and the deed in hand. I can have an officer meet you there, she said, her tone shifting from bored to bureaucratic. We can't intervene unless a crime is in progress, but we can do a civil standby. That is all I need, I said. 9 a.m. on the 24th. I want everything to be by the book. I hung up. Step 1 was complete. The next 3 days were spent in a Kinko's copy center, which felt appropriate. My family loved to manufacture their image. It was only right that I manufactured the paperwork to dismantle it. I printed 4 separate documents: notice to vacate, notice of trespass, revocation of license to occupy. I printed them on heavy, cream-colored linen paper. It was the kind of paper used for wedding invitations or high-stakes legal threats. I wanted the tactile experience to be confusing for them. When you are handed something this expensive, you expect good news. I prepared one for Marilyn, one for Grant, one for Tessa, and a general one for all other occupants. I placed each document in a stiff specialized envelope, the kind that doesn't bend. I wasn't just evicting them, I was serving them. On December 23rd, the day before the axe was set to fall, I drove to Evergreen Harbor Lodge. It was early afternoon. The winter sun was low and pale, casting long shadows across the lake. The water looked like a sheet of hammered steel. I knew, from checking the check-in emails my mother had sent to the management company, that the family was not due to arrive until 6 p.m. They liked to drive up after Grant finished his half-day at the office. I had a 3-hour window. I pulled up to the gate. I didn't use the keypad. I used the remote app on my phone. The iron gate swung open silently. Obeying my command, it was a small thrill, a secret rush of dopamine that I let myself enjoy for exactly 5 seconds before pushing it back down. I parked the car and walked to the front door. The smart lock chirped as I engaged it. Click, whir, open. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. It was the scent of pine, cinnamon, and wood smoke. It was the smell of 15 Christmases I had never tasted. The management company, or rather, the premium concierge service my mother paid extra for, had already been here. The heating was on, the fire was laid in the grate, ready to be lit. And the photos were up. This was the part of the ritual I had hated the most from afar. But seeing it up close was a visceral shock. My mother had a standing arrangement with the concierge. Every year, she shipped a box of framed family photographs ahead of time, and the staff was instructed to arrange them on the mantelpiece, the side tables, and the piano before the family arrived. It was an effort to colonize the space. It was how Marilyn turned a rental into home. I walked slowly around the great room. There was a photo of Tessa and Grant fishing on the dock, laughing. There was a photo of Marilyn and Grant toasting with champagne in this very room. There was a formal portrait of the 3 of them, Marilyn, Grant, Tessa, wearing matching cable-knit sweaters, sitting on a white sofa. There were 22 frames in the living room alone. I counted them. 22 snapshots of happiness, 22 moments of family history, and I was in 0 of them. It wasn't that I was blurry in the background. It wasn't that I was cropped out. I simply did not exist in this visual universe. If a stranger walked into this room, they would assume Marilyn Banks had only one daughter. They would assume the family was a closed triangle, perfect and impenetrable. I felt a sting behind my eyes, but it wasn't a tear. It was pressure. It was the pressure of a truth that had been compressed for too long. Looking for a way out, I reached into my tote bag. I had brought one photo. It was small, only 5 by 7 inches. It was black and white. It was taken 10 years ago, on a rainy Tuesday at the nursing home. It was just me and Grandma Evelyn. I was sitting on the edge of her bed, reading to her, and she was looking at me with a fierce, protective clarity. A nurse had taken it for me. It wasn't a glamorous photo. We weren't wearing matching sweaters. The lighting was harsh, but it was real. I walked over to the massive stone fireplace. The mantel was crowded with the golden trio. I picked up the centerpiece photo, the large, silver-framed portrait of Marilyn, Grant, and Tessa smiling their perfect, teeth-whitening smiles. I moved it to the side. I didn't knock it over. I just displaced it. I placed the photo of me and Evelyn in the exact center of the mantel. It looked small against the grandeur of the room, a tiny black and white anchor in a sea of technicolor lies. "There," I whispered to the empty room. "Now the owner is present." I did not stay long. I didn't want to leave a scent. I didn't want to disturb the pillows. I wanted them to arrive, to unpack, to pour their wine, and to feel safe. I wanted them to sleep one night in the belly of the beast before the jaws snapped shut. I left the lodge at 3:30. I drove to a motel 10 miles down the road, a nondescript place where no one would recognize a Banks. I ate a sandwich from a gas station. I watched the local news. I waited for the sun to come up on the 24th. Morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. It was cold, the kind of cold that snaps twigs and freezes breath in the lungs. I showered and dressed. This was not a day for jeans. This was not a day for comfort. I put on a pair of tailored wool trousers and a silk blouse in a deep, dark shade of burgundy, the color of old wine or dried blood. I put on a structured coat. I pulled my hair back into a tight, low bun. I applied my makeup with the precision of a soldier applying war paint. I looked in the motel mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I didn't look like the poor Juno they talked about in hushed tones. I looked like a woman who signed the front of the check, not the back. I drove to the meeting point. Officer Daniel Rourke was waiting for me in the parking lot of a diner just outside the gated community. He was a large man, solid and serious, with a face that had seen enough nonsense to know it when he saw it. He was leaning against his patrol car, drinking coffee from a styrofoam cup. I pulled up next to him and got out. "Ms. Banks?" he asked. "Officer Rourke," I said, extending my hand. "Thank you for coming." He looked me up and down, assessing the threat level. He saw a 34-year-old financial manager in expensive shoes, holding a leather portfolio. He relaxed slightly. "I need to see the paperwork before we go in," he said. I opened the portfolio on the hood of his car. I laid it out. The deed, the transfer of title, the LLC formation documents listing me as the sole proprietor, the trespassing statutes. He read them carefully. He checked the dates. He checked the signatures. "Looks like you own the place." "All right," he said, handing the papers back. "And you say the occupants have no lease?" "They have a lease agreement with a management company that I have revoked," I said calmly. "They are currently occupying the property without the owner's consent. I have the cancellation notice here, time-stamped from yesterday." Rourke tipped his hat back. "Okay, here is how this goes. I am there to keep the peace. I am not a judge. If they produce a lease that looks valid, I can't physically drag them out. It becomes a civil matter for the courts. But if you are the owner and you tell them to leave, they are technically trespassing if they refuse. I can advise them of that." "That is all I ask," I said. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You know these people? The last name is the same." "They are my family," I said. "My mother and stepfather." Rourke let out a low whistle. He looked at the paperwork again, then at me. "Christmas Eve eviction of your own mother," he said. "That is cold, lady. It is 12 degrees outside." "Officer," I said. "The weather is appropriate." He studied my face for a moment longer. He wasn't judging me, exactly. He was measuring the weight of what was about to happen. "I have seen a lot of domestic calls," Rourke said quietly. "Usually involves alcohol or a cheating spouse, but this is calculated. You sure you want to do this? When you open that door, Ms. Banks, you can't close it again. You ring that bell, and you break the family. There is no going back." The wind cut through the parking lot, whipping the edge of my coat. I thought about the wooden stool. I thought about the text message that said, "You can come if you want." I thought about the empty chair at the table for 15 years. I looked Rourke in the eye. "I have not gone back in 15 years. Officer," I said, "I have been standing outside that door the entire time. Today is just the day I finally walk in." Rourke nodded slowly. He crushed his coffee cup and tossed it into the trash can. "All right," he said. "Lead the way. I'll be right behind you." We got into our cars. I led the procession, a black sedan followed by a police cruiser. We drove through the winding roads of the gated community. The trees were frosted with ice. The other houses were festive. Wreaths on the doors, smoke curling from chimneys. We turned onto Evergreen Drive. The lodge rose up before us, majestic and imposing. The SUV was in the driveway. The convertible was parked next to it. I parked my car blocking the exit. Rourke parked behind me, his lights off, but his presence undeniable. I checked the time on my dashboard. 11:52 in the morning. I took a breath. I picked up the leather portfolio containing the eviction notices. I stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched under my boots. It was the only sound in the world. I walked up the driveway. I walked past the cars that had driven away from me so many times. I walked up the steps to the wraparound porch. I stood in front of the massive oak door. I didn't knock. I pulled out my phone. I opened the app. Unlock. The mechanism disengaged with a heavy metallic thud. I turned the handle. The door swung open. The heat rushed out to meet me, carrying the sound of laughter. I heard Tessa's voice. I heard the clink of silverware. I stepped across the threshold. The show was over. The critic had arrived. It was exactly 11:52 in the morning when the parade began. I was standing inside the foyer of the lodge, watching through the narrow side window next to the front door. The glass was tinted, designed so that those inside could see out. But the world outside saw only their own reflection. It was a perfect metaphor for my family. The first vehicle to crest the hill was my stepfather's black SUV. It moved with the slow, entitled weight of a presidential motorcade. Behind him was Tessa's white convertible, top up against the cold, gleaming like a polished tooth. Then came the others, a train of sedans and crossovers carrying aunts, uncles, and cousins, the supporting cast of the annual production. They parked in the circular driveway, arranging themselves in a formation that had been perfected over a decade and a half. I watched them emerge. It was like watching a nature documentary about a pack of wolves returning to their den. Marilyn was the first out. She wore a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than my first car, wrapped tight against the chill. She didn't look at the lake or the trees. She looked immediately at the house, inspecting it for flaws. She gestured to Grant, pointing at the porch railing, likely noting a spot of peeling paint or a stray leaf that the groundskeepers had missed. Grant got out and immediately started unloading the heavy cooler, the one filled with the expensive wine they brought from home because they didn't trust the local selection. Tessa hopped out of her car, phone already in hand, recording a story for Instagram. I could see her mouth moving, narrating the arrival. We made it. Home sweet home. The rest of the family spilled out, a cacophony of greetings and laughter. The air was filled with the sounds of people who felt safe. They stretched their legs, inhaling the crisp mountain air, claiming the space with their voices. "Grant, grab the wreath box," my mother commanded, her voice muffled by the glass but still distinct. "I want it up before lunch." "I call the master suite," Tessa shouted, laughing as she ran toward the porch. "Mom said I could have the jacuzzi tub this year since I just got promoted." "Only if you cook breakfast tomorrow," Grant called back, struggling with 3 suitcases. "Deal." They walked up the wide stone steps. I could hear their boots thumping on the wood of the porch. I could hear the rustle of their coats. They were so close that I could see the steam of their breath on the other side of the door. I took a step back. I smoothed the front of my burgundy blouse. I checked my pulse. It was steady, cold, even. Marilyn reached the door first. She didn't knock. Why would she? She thought she owned the place. She reached into her purse and pulled out a slip of paper, the confirmation email from the management company with the access code. She punched the numbers into the keypad. 4729. The lock flashed red. A low negative beep sounded. Marilyn frowned. She adjusted her glasses and typed it again, slower this time, emphasizing each button press with an annoyed jab of her manicured finger. 4729. Beep, red light. Grant, she sighed, turning around with an expression of mild irritation. The code isn't working. Did you change it in the email reply? No, Grant said, puffing as he set the bags down. It's the same as last year. Try it again. I did try it, she snapped. It's dead. Or jammed. She jiggled the handle, locked tight. Let me try, Tessa said. Pushing past her mother, she tried the code. Beep. That is so weird. Maybe the battery died? Ridiculous, Marilyn said. I paid the concierge fee specifically to have everything checked. I am going to call Rick right now and give him a piece of my mind. Standing out in the cold like refugees, it is unacceptable. She reached for her phone. That was the moment. I reached out and turned the deadbolt from the inside. The sound was loud, a heavy mechanical clack that echoed through the wood. Outside, they froze. Marilyn looked at the lock. Startled. She hadn't touched it. I gripped the handle. The metal was cold in my hand. I pulled the door open. The motion was smooth and deliberate. The heavy oak swung inward, revealing the foyer, the warm light of the chandelier, and me. I stood dead center in the frame. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just stood there, occupying the space they wanted to enter. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. The scene outside was a tableau of confusion. Marilyn was mid-dial on her phone. Grant was holding a cooler handle with both hands. Tessa was mid-sentence. Marilyn blinked. Her brain was trying to process the data and failing. She saw a woman standing in her house. She saw the dark hair, the familiar eyes, the burgundy silk. Juno? The name came out not as a greeting, but as a question of physics. It was the tone you would use if you found a deer standing in your bathroom. Then, the shock was replaced instantly by the defensive aggression she used whenever she lost control of a situation. Her eyes narrowed, her spine stiffened. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't say Merry Christmas. She didn't step forward to hug me. "What are you doing inside?" she repeated, her voice rising. "We have this place booked. How did you get the code?" I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, and then systematically erased me because I was inconvenient. "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was calm, projecting clearly over the wind. "Welcome to my home," Marilyn scoffed. It was a sharp, dismissive sound. "Your home? Juno, don't be dramatic. You know we rent this place every year. Did you break in? Is this some kind of stunt because you didn't get an invite?" Tessa stepped up beside her mother, her face twisting into a sneer. "Oh my God. Seriously? You broke in? That is so creepy. Juno, we are trying to have a nice family vacation and you are literally stalking us." "I didn't break in," I said. "And I'm not stalking you. I'm waiting for you." "Well, you can wait outside," Marilyn said, stepping forward as if to push past me. "We have the lease. We paid the deposit. You need to leave before I call the police and have you removed. I don't know what kind of mental breakdown you are having, but do not drag us into it." "You can't call the police," I said. "They are already here." I stepped aside slightly, gesturing toward the bottom of the driveway. Officer Daniel Rourke stepped out from behind my car. He walked up the gravel drive, his boots crunching loudly in the sudden silence. He kept his hands on his belt, his face neutral but authoritative. Marilyn stopped. Her face went pale, then red. "Officer!" she called out, waving her hand at me. "Thank God. My daughter has broken into our rental property. She is refusing to leave. Please remove her." Rourke walked up the steps. He didn't look at Marilyn. He looked at me. Everything okay here, Ms. Banks? He asked. Just a misunderstanding about the guest list. Officer, I said. Guest list? Marilyn's voice went up an octave. We aren't guests. We are the tenants. We have a contract. She fumbled with her phone, pulling up the email from the management company. Look, right here. Confirmation for December 23rd to the 30th. We paid $6,000. Rourke looked at the phone, then back at Marilyn. Ma'am, Rourke said, his voice deep and flat. I have reviewed the property records this morning. The lease you are referring to was canceled yesterday by the owner. You were sent a notification. Canceled? Marilyn gasped. That's impossible. I didn't get any notification. And who canceled it? Rick? I will have his job. Rick didn't cancel it, I said. Marilyn whipped her head back to me. The owner canceled it, I said. I know the owner didn't cancel it, Marilyn shouted, losing her composure entirely. The owner is some investor in Nashville who doesn't even know we exist. Why are you lying? I reached into the pocket of my coat. I pulled out the deed. I pulled out the transfer of title documents. I pulled out the notice to vacate. I held them out to her. The owner knows exactly who you are, I said. Marilyn took the papers. Her hands were shaking. She read the first line, then the second. Owner of record, Juno Banks. Property, 42 Evergreen Drive. Title transfer, date, February 14th. The color drained from her face so completely that for a second, I thought she might faint. She looked at the paper, then at the house, then at me. No, she whispered. This is fake. You printed this. It is filed with the county clerk, Officer Rourke said. I verified it myself this morning. Ms. Juno Banks is the sole legal owner of this property. She has the right to determine who enters. The silence that followed was absolute. The cousins, who had been unloading bags, stopped. The aunts and uncles froze. Grant, who was still holding the cooler, set it down on the driveway with a heavy thud. The narrative they had been fed for 15 years, the story of Juno the recluse, Juno the difficult one, Juno who chose to stay away, shattered. Tessa was the first to break the silence. She snatched the paper from her mother's hand. She read it, her eyes widening. You bought it? Tessa stammered. How? You can't afford this. This place is worth millions. Inheritance, I said. Grandma Evelyn left it to me. Grandma? Tessa looked confused. Grandma left us the house in the suburbs. That was it. That was the will. She left you the house in the suburbs, I corrected. She left me the holding company that has owned this lodge for 20 years. I watched the realization hit them like a physical blow. Wait, Grant said, stepping forward. His voice was trembling. Are you saying Evelyn owned this place? The whole time? The whole time, I said. Every check you wrote, every time you bragged about your view, you were paying her. And since February, you have been paying me. Marilyn looked up. Her eyes were wild, darting around as if looking for an exit. You knew, she hissed. You knew when I renovated the kitchen. You let me spend $30,000 on that kitchen. I didn't let you do anything, I said coolly. You asked the management company for permission to donate upgrades to the landlord. The landlord accepted. Thank you for the wolf range. Mother, it cooks beautifully. Marilyn made a sound like a strangled cat. She took a step toward me, her hand raised as if to slap me. Officer Rourke took one heavy step forward. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a wall. Ma'am, he warned. Step back. Marilyn froze. She lowered her hand, trembling with rage. This is entrapment, she spat. This is cruel. You tricked us. You let us drive all the way up here. You drove past my house for 15 years, I interrupted. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through her shouting like a razor. You drove past my apartment to come here. You forgot my address, but you never forgot the way to the lake. We invited you, Tessa screamed. Tears were streaming down her face now. ruining her makeup. Mom told you to come. You never came. I was never invited. Tessa, I said. I was tolerated. There is a difference. I looked out at the crowd of relatives standing by the cars. They were staring at me with open mouths. They were seeing me for the first time, not as the blurry figure in the background, but as the person holding the keys. I am the owner of this property, I announced, raising my voice so everyone could hear. And currently, none of you have a valid lease. That means you are trespassing. You're kicking us out? A cousin shouted from the back. It's Christmas Eve. I am not kicking you out, I said. I am simply enforcing the boundaries you established. You established that this is a place for family only, and according to your actions for the last decade and a half. I am not family. I am an outsider. I looked back at Marilyn. So, as an outsider, I said, I am exercising my right to refuse service. You can't do this, Marilyn whispered. She looked small suddenly. The coat looked too big for her. The turkey is in the car. The gifts, the tradition. The tradition is over, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the stack of envelopes I had prepared. The removal notices. I have prepared a grace period, I said, handing the stack to Officer Rourke. Officer, please distribute these. Everyone has 1 hour to remove their vehicles and their personal effects from the driveway. Anyone remaining on the property after 1 o'clock will be cited for criminal trespass. Rourke took the envelopes. He began walking down the steps toward the shell-shocked crowd. Juno, Grant said. He looked broken. Please, can't we just talk about this? We can talk, I said. You have my phone number. You've had it for 15 years. Feel free to use it once you are off my property. I stepped back. You have 58 minutes, I said. And then, in front of my mother, my stepfather, my sister, and the entire extended clan, I did the one thing they had done to me 1,000 times. I closed the door. I turned the lock. Click. I was alone inside. But for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like victory. The silence that followed the locking of the door was not empty. It was heavy, vibrating with the kind of shock that precedes an explosion. Through the thick oak and the glass panels, I could hear the muffled sounds of confusion turning into outrage. I stood in the foyer, my hands still resting on the cool metal of the deadbolt. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally, after 15 years, dropping the curtain on their performance. I did not hide. I did not retreat to the kitchen or the back office. I turned and walked back to the side window. Outside, the scene had devolved into chaos. Marilyn was screaming at Officer Rourke. Grant was pacing in a tight circle, running his hands through his thinning hair. Tessa was crying, sitting on the hood of her convertible, while the extended family, the aunts, uncles, and cousins who had been complicit in my erasure, stood in huddled clumps, whispering and looking at the house like it was a bomb that had failed to detonate. Marilyn was waving the papers I had given her. I could see her mouth moving violently. She was pointing at the house, then at Rourke, then at the sky. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was rewriting the narrative in real time. She was spinning a new web. I unlocked the door. I did not open it fully. I opened it just enough to step out onto the porch, closing it behind me but keeping my hand on the handle. I stood on the top step, looking down at them. From this vantage point, I was taller than all of them. "This is fraud!" Marilyn shouted the moment she saw me. She marched to the bottom of the steps, her face blotchy with cold and rage. She shook the copy of the will in the air. "You manipulated her!" Mother was 89 years old. She was confused. She didn't know what she was signing. You probably withheld her medication or coerced her. Grandma Evelyn was sharper at 89 than you have ever been. "Marilyn," I said. My voice was steady. And she was not coerced. She was observant. "I am going to sue you," Marilyn spat. "I am going to contest this will. I will drag you through probate court for the next 10 years. You won't see a dime of this property. I will bury you in legal fees." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I had been waiting for this threat. It was the only card she had left to play. "I thought you might say that," I said. "So I have someone on the line who would like to clarify the situation for you." I tapped the screen and put the call on speaker. I turned the volume up to the maximum. "Walter?" I said. "Are you there?" The deep, gravelly voice of Walter Price echoed across the frozen driveway. "I am here. Juno." Marilyn froze. She knew that voice. Walter had been the family attorney for decades, the man who handled every serious matter the bank's family had ever faced. "Walter!" Marilyn cried out, her tone shifting instantly from aggression to a desperate plea for an ally. "Thank God. You have to stop this. Juno has forged some documents. She claims Mother left her the lodge. You need to tell her—" "Marilyn," Walter interrupted. His voice was not warm. It was the cold, flat tone of a judge delivering a verdict. "I prepared those documents myself. I witnessed Evelyn's signature. I recorded the video deposition of her mental state on the day of signing." Marilyn's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Furthermore," Walter continued, "you should read paragraph 14 of the trust agreement. It is a no-contest clause. Evelyn was very specific. If you, or anyone acting on your behalf, attempts to challenge the validity of the Lakeside Ventures Trust or Juno's ownership of the property, you immediately forfeit your entire inheritance from the personal estate, the house in the suburbs, the jewelry, the cash savings. All of it will revert to the charitable trust." The silence on the driveway was absolute. Even the wind seemed to stop to listen. "So," Walter said, "if you sue Juno, you lose your house. If you sue Juno, you lose the diamond rings you are currently wearing. Do you understand me, Marilyn?" Marilyn looked down at her hands. She looked at the diamond ring that had belonged to Evelyn. She looked at the SUV that was likely paid for with Evelyn's money. "She did that?" Marilyn whispered. "She hated me that much?" "She didn't hate you," Walter said. "She just knew you. Goodbye, Marilyn." The line went dead. I looked down at my mother. She looked shrunken. The legal threat, her favorite weapon, had just been dismantled. Officer Rourke cleared his throat. He stepped forward, holding the stack of notices I had prepared. "Folks," Rourke said, his voice booming slightly, "I am going to hand these out now. This is a notice to vacate. It officially informs you that you are no longer welcome on this private property. You have 45 minutes remaining to clear the driveway." He began moving through the crowd, handing the thick, cream-colored envelopes to the aunts and uncles. They took them like they were receiving death warrants. "Juno, please," Grant said, stepping up to the porch railing. He looked pale, his eyes wide and watery behind his glasses. "We can fix this. We can pay you rent, double the rate. Just don't do this to your mother on Christmas. It will kill her." "She looks very alive to me." "Grant," I said, "and I don't want your money. I want you to leave." "But why?" Grant asked. "Why are you doing this? We forgot to invite you a few times. It was a mistake. We are family. Families forgive." "A few times?" I asked. 15 years. Grant, that is not a mistake. That is a policy." "It wasn't a policy," Marilyn shouted, finding her voice again. She was trembling now, not from cold, but from humiliation. "We thought you didn't want to come. Everyone knows you are solitary. Everyone knows you prefer to be alone." She turned to the crowd of relatives, seeking validation. "Tell her. Haven't I always said Juno is busy? Haven't I always said she hates the noise?" The cousins looked at their shoes. The uncles coughed. Nobody wanted to make eye contact. They had all consumed the lie because it was easier than asking the hard question. Then, a movement from the back of the group caught my eye. It was Great Aunt June, my grandmother's sister, the one who sent the text messages, the one who was terrified of conflict. She pushed her way through the huddle of cousins. She was a small woman in a gray wool coat, looking terrified, but she walked right up to Marilyn. "Stop it, Marilyn," June said. Her voice was shaking, but it was audible. Marilyn blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" "Stop lying. June said. She clutched her purse tight against her chest. For 15 years, you told us Juno was working. You told us she was on a ski trip. You told us she had a boyfriend and went to his parents' house last year. You told me she specifically asked not to be disturbed. June turned to look up at me. Her eyes were full of tears. I texted you, June said to me. But I never asked if you wanted to come. I assumed Marilyn was telling the truth. I assumed you hated us. I never hated you, Aunt June, I said softly. I waited by the phone every single year. June turned back to Marilyn. The fear in her face was replaced by a sudden, sharp anger. Did you ever ask her? June demanded. In 15 years, Marilyn, did you ever actually ask your daughter to come here? Marilyn stammered. I sent invites. The texts didn't go through, or she was busy. Liar, I said from the porch. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. You didn't forget, I said. And it wasn't technology. You didn't want me here. Tell them why. Mother, tell them the real reason I'm not in any of those photos on the mantel. Marilyn looked at me. Her eyes were hard, cornered. The mask of the socialite was cracking, revealing something ugly and raw underneath. You know why, she hissed. I do, I said. But they don't. Tell Grant. Tell Tessa. Tell them why their perfect family couldn't include me. Marilyn clenched her fists. She looked at Grant, who was staring at her with a dawning horror. She looked at Tessa, who had stopped crying and was watching her mother with wide, confused eyes. The pressure was too much. The facade collapsed. Because I can't look at you. Marilyn screamed. The scream tore out of her throat, shrill and hysterical. It echoed off the lake. I can't look at you, she yelled again, pointing a shaking finger at my face. Every time I look at you, I see him. You have his eyes. You have his jaw. You walk like him. You sound like him. She wasn't talking about Grant. My father, I said. That bastard. She spat. That mistake. The 3 years of my life I wasted on a man who was nothing but a drunk and a loser. I divorced him. I got rid of him. I scrubbed him out of my life. I found Grant. I built this life. I built something perfect. She was panting now, her breath coming in white clouds. And then there you are, she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Living proof that I wasn't always perfect. Every Christmas, I wanted to sit at that table and look at a beautiful family and pretend that my life started the day I met Grant. But you are a walking stain. Juno, you are a ghost of a marriage I want to bury. So you buried me instead, I said. I just wanted peace, Marilyn cried. I just wanted 1 week a year where I didn't have to look across the table and see his face staring back at me. Is that so wrong? Is it so wrong to want to protect my happiness? Grant made a sound. It was a low, guttural groan. He stepped back from Marilyn as if she were radioactive. Marilyn, Grant whispered, you told me she was difficult. You told me she reminded you of bad times. You never said you were punishing her for her father. I did it for us. Grant, Marilyn pleaded, turning to him. I did it so we could have our happy memories. I did it so Tessa wouldn't have to deal with the drama. Tessa slid off the hood of the car. She walked slowly toward her mother. She looked like a child who had just found out Santa Claus was actually a burglar. Mom, Tessa said, her voice trembling. You told me Juno hated me. You told me she was jealous of me because I was the good one. You said that's why she never came. She is jealous, Marilyn insisted. Look at her. Look what she is doing to us. I am not jealous. Tessa, I said. I am just the mirror she doesn't want to look into. I walked down one step. I felt a strange sense of lightness. The secret was out. The poison had been drawn from the wound. You hear that? I asked the crowd. I wasn't too busy. I wasn't working. I wasn't difficult. I just had the wrong face. I looked at Marilyn. She stood alone on the gravel. Grant had backed away. Tessa was standing midway between us, looking lost. The relatives were silent, staring at Marilyn with a mixture of shock and disgust. For 15 years, she had controlled the story. She had painted me as the villain. In 5 minutes, she had painted herself as a monster. "You aren't punishing a dead man, Mother," I said. "He has been dead for 10 years. He doesn't care. You are punishing me. You punished a 19-year-old girl who just wanted to see her mom on Christmas. You punished a 20-year-old who drove 3 hours to surprise you." I pointed to the open door behind me. "You wanted a perfect stage," I said. "You wanted a set where you could play the perfect wife and mother. Well, I own the stage now, and I'm canceling the show." Marilyn looked at the house. She looked at the warm light spilling out of the foyer. She looked at the life she had curated so carefully. "You can't do this," she whispered. "It's Christmas." "Yes," I said, "and for the first time in 15 years, I am going to have a very Merry Christmas." I looked at Officer Rourke. "Officer," I said, "I believe their time is almost up." Rourke checked his watch. He looked at Marilyn with a gaze that held zero sympathy. 30 minutes, ma'am," Rourke said. "I suggest you start packing the cooler back into the car." Grant turned away. He didn't look at Marilyn. He walked to the SUV and opened the trunk. He started loading the bags he had just taken out. Tessa stood there for a moment longer. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also with a new, terrifying clarity. She looked at her mother, then she turned and walked to her convertible. She got in and slammed the door. Marilyn stood alone, the queen without a court. I turned my back on her. I walked up the steps. I walked through the door into the warmth of the lodge. I didn't lock it this time. I didn't need to. The wall between us wasn't made of wood anymore. It was made of the truth, and that was a barrier she could never cross. The silence of Evergreen Harbor Lodge was the most expensive thing I had ever owned. And I spent the first 24 hours of my ownership simply listening to it. I listened to the wind rattling the double-paned windows. I listened to the refrigerator, my refrigerator, humming in the kitchen. I listened to the fire crackling in the hearth, burning logs that Grant had carried in before I evicted him, but while the house was quiet. My pocket was vibrating like a nest of angry hornets. The fallout of a nuclear detonation does not happen all at once. First comes the flash, which was the confrontation on the porch. Then comes the blast wave, which was them driving away. And finally comes the radiation, the invisible, poisoning sickness that seeps into everything. My radiation came in the form of text messages. It started about 20 minutes after the last taillight disappeared around the bend of the driveway. I had not been re-added to the family group chat. Marilyn would rather die than give me that satisfaction. But individual missiles began to strike my phone with relentless precision. The first one was from a cousin named Becky, a woman who lived in Ohio and hadn't seen me since I was 12. "I heard what you did. You are sick. Kicking your own mother out on Christmas Eve? I hope you rot in that big house alone." I looked at the message. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the urge to defend myself. I felt the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. Becky didn't know the truth. She only knew the version Marilyn had screamed into her phone the moment she got signal. In Marilyn's version, I was the ungrateful, mentally unstable daughter who had stolen an inheritance and weaponized it. I swiped left, delete, then came a message from Uncle Robert. "Juno, this is excessive. Whatever beef you have with your mom, there are children involved. We have gifts in the car. Be the bigger person and unlock the gate." I laughed out loud. It was a dry, sharp sound in the empty room. Be the bigger person. That was the mantra of the abuser's enabler. It is always the victim's job to be big, so the aggressor can stay small and comfortable. I replied to Robert. It was the only reply I sent to the flying monkeys. "The gate stays locked. If you want to exchange gifts, I suggest you do it in the parking lot of the diner down the road. They have excellent pie." Then I blocked him. By 6 in the evening. The digital assault had shifted. The initial wave of shock had passed, and the family had fractured into camps. I could see it happening in real time based on who was messaging me and what they were saying. There was the evil Juno camp, led by Marilyn's staunchest allies. They sent long paragraphs about biblical forgiveness and honoring thy father and mother. They called me bitter. They called me cruel. They told me I had ruined the magic of the holiday. Then there was the we didn't know camp. These were the cowards. These were the people who had sat at that dining table for 15 years, watching me not be there, and had never once asked why. One aunt texted, "Juno, I am so confused. Marilyn always said you were working. If I had known you wanted to come, I would have driven to get you myself. Please don't shut us all out." I read that one 3 times. If I had known, it is a seductive lie. It absolves them of responsibility. It suggests that their ignorance was accidental, rather than a carefully curated choice. It is much easier to believe the lie that your niece is a workaholic than to confront the truth that your sister is a monster who discards her own child. Believing the truth requires action. Believing the lie allows you to eat the turkey in peace. I didn't reply to her. Her guilt was not my project to manage. But amidst the noise, there was one voice that broke through the static with genuine remorse. Great Aunt June called me at 8 o'clock. I almost didn't answer. I was sitting on the rug in front of the fire, drinking a glass of the wine Grant had left behind, a $60 Cabernet that tasted like justice. But when I saw Aunt June on the caller ID, I remembered her face on the driveway. I remembered her standing up to Marilyn. I slid the bar to accept. "Hello, Aunt June," I said. "Juno," she breathed. She was crying. I could hear the distinct sound of a car engine in the background. She was driving. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry." "You don't have to apologize," I said. "You were the only one who ever texted." "It wasn't enough," she wept. "I knew. Deep down. I think I knew. Marilyn, she has this way of making you feel crazy if you question her. She freezes you out, and I was so afraid of being frozen out, just like you, that I let it happen. I let her erase you because I didn't want to be erased myself." It was the most honest thing anyone in my family had said to me in 2 decades. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm driving home," she said. Marilyn wanted us all to go to a hotel in Asheville. She wanted to have a crisis dinner. I couldn't do it. I couldn't look at her face and hear her spin this into another story where she is the victim. I told her I was sick and I left. "You left?" I asked. Surprised. The Banks family never defected. "I left," June said. "And I think I'm done. Juno, I'm 80 years old. I don't have enough Christmases left to spend them pretending." We talked for 20 minutes. We didn't fix everything. You cannot fix 15 years of silence in one phone call. But for the first time, the connection between us wasn't built on a lie. She wasn't pitying me. She was respecting me. When we hung up, I felt a strange loosening in my chest. One bridge had been burned, but another had been built. Then, the messages from the immediate family began to arrive. They waited until late. They waited until the darkness had fully set in, perhaps hoping that the night would make me softer. At 10:30, my phone buzzed with a message from Tessa. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't a defense of our mother. It was a single, terrifying block of text that looked like it had been written and deleted a dozen times. "I am sitting in a hotel room in Asheville. Mom is in the lobby screaming at the concierge because they don't have the specific pillow she likes. Dad is at the bar. I have been thinking about everything you said on the porch. I have been thinking about the timeline. When I was 10, Mom told me you didn't come to my ballet recital because you didn't care about kids. When I was 16, she said you missed my graduation because you had a big date. I believed her. I made you the villain in my head because it made sense. But today, looking at her face when you asked her why I saw it, I saw the hate, and it scared me. I don't know who she is, and I don't know who I am if everything she told me was a lie." 3 dots danced on the screen. She was typing more. "Do you hate me?" The question hung there, glowing in the dark room. Do I hate her? I looked at the fire. I thought about Tessa. She was the golden child. Yes, she was the beneficiary of my exclusion. She got the love, the money, the attention, But she was also a victim. She was a doll that Marilyn dressed up and played with. She had no autonomy. She had no reality of her own. Her entire identity was constructed around being the good daughter to Marilyn's perfect mother. Today, I had taken a sledgehammer to that identity. I typed back, "I don't hate you. Tessa, I hate that you were used as a weapon against me, but now you know the truth. What you do with it is up to you." She didn't reply. I didn't expect her to. She had a lot of deprogramming to do. Then, at 11:15, an email arrived. The subject line was simply, "Grant." I opened it. Grant was a man of few words. Usually because Marilyn spoke for him, this email was short, stark, and devoid of the usual excuses. "Juno, I am writing this from the hotel bar. Your mother is upstairs. I have spent the last 6 hours trying to rationalize what happened, but I can't. I kept telling myself it was just a family squabble, but June said something to me before she left. She asked me how I could sleep at night knowing I let a child feel unwanted. I realized tonight that I have been a coward. I let your mother's anger dictate the climate of our home. I saw you hurting, and I looked away because it was easier than fighting her. I let your loneliness become a tradition. I let your absence become normal. I am ashamed. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I heard you today. You were right to close the door, Grant." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I let your loneliness become a tradition. That was it. That was the summary of my life. It wasn't just Marilyn's active hatred. It was Grant's passive acceptance that had sealed my fate. He had normalized the abuse by refusing to name it. I didn't reply to him. I saved the email in the folder with the screenshots. It was evidence. It was validation. It was proof that I wasn't crazy. And finally, inevitably, came the Queen herself. Marilyn did not text. Marilyn did not email. Marilyn operated on the principle that if she could just hear her voice, she could charm or bully her way back into control. She tried calling from her cell, blocked. She tried calling from Grant's cell, ignored. She tried calling from the hotel room phone, ignored. Then, she got desperate. She bought a burner phone, or perhaps she borrowed one from a stranger in the lobby. My phone rang at midnight. Unknown number. I knew it was her. I answered. But I didn't say hello. I just listened. "Juno," her voice came through, breathy and sweet, the voice she used when she wanted a table at a fully booked restaurant. "Don't hang up. Please. We need to be rational adults here." I said nothing. I just breathed into the receiver. "Look, I know emotions were high today," she continued, her voice gaining speed. "I know I said some things I didn't mean. I was shocked. You have to understand. It was a shock. But I have been thinking. This ownership situation, it's silly for us to fight. You have the asset. But we have the experience running the events. We have the network." She paused, waiting for me to agree. When I didn't, she pivoted to the pitch. "I have a proposal. We can turn this into a partnership, a co-ownership arrangement. You keep the deed, obviously, but you add me as a managing partner. We can split the rental income. I can manage the bookings. I know exactly what the high-end clients want. And of course, the family would retain the Christmas week slot. Gratis, as a perk of management, it's a win-win. You get the money, I do the work, and we heal the family image. People are already talking. Juno, we need to control the narrative." I closed my eyes. Even now, stripped of her shelter, standing in the wreckage of her lies, she was trying to negotiate a deal. She was trying to frame her capitulation as a business opportunity. She truly believed that everything, even love, even forgiveness, was a transaction. "Are you finished?" I asked. Yes, that's the broad strokes," she said, sounding hopeful. "What do you think?" I think," I said, "that you are trespassing on my phone line." "Juno, don't be like this." Her voice hardened instantly, the sweetness vanishing like steam. "I am offering you an olive branch, you ungrateful little—" "Goodbye, Marilyn," I said. "If you hang up, I will never speak to you again," she screamed. I will cut you off for good." "You can't cut off someone who is already holding the scissors," I said. I hung up. I blocked the number. I put the phone on the coffee table. It was done. The cord was cut. I sat in the silence for a long time. I watched the fire burn down to embers. I felt lighter than I had ever felt in my life. I was alone, yes, but for the first time, I wasn't lonely. I was solitary. There is a difference. I was about to go upstairs to the master bedroom, my bedroom, when I remembered the last instruction Walter Price had given me. He had handed me a thick, sealed envelope when I left his office weeks ago. "Keep this safe," he had said. "Do not open it until the deed is done. Do not open it until they know." Evelyn was very specific about the timing. I had put it in my bag and forgotten about it in the chaos of preparation. I went to my bag. I pulled out the envelope. It was heavy, made of thick, expensive paper. On the front, in Evelyn's handwriting, it said, "For Juno, open when the house is yours and the truth is theirs." I sat back down on the sofa. My hands were trembling slightly. I thought the surprises were over. I thought the victory was complete. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. Inside was a stack of papers. Old papers. They smelled of cedar and time. There was a letter addressed to Marilyn, dated 10 years ago, but never mailed. There was a notebook, filled with dates and numbers, and there was a printed email chain from 15 years ago. I pulled out the letter first. I started to read. And as I read, the blood drained from my face. The sense of victory I had felt moments ago shifted into something darker, something colder. I had thought this was a story about a mother who rejected her daughter because she looked like an ex-husband. I thought it was a story about emotional cruelty. But as I turned the pages, as I looked at the numbers in the notebook and the words in the email, I realized I was wrong. Marilyn hadn't just hated me. Marilyn hadn't just erased me to protect her perfect image. This wasn't just about feelings. This was about money. Marilyn had a plan. She had always had a plan, and I was the only thing standing in the way of it. I looked at the email chain again. It was between Marilyn and a developer who wanted to buy the land the lodge sat on. "Once the old woman is gone," Marilyn had written, "I will handle the sale, but we need to make sure there are no other claimants. We need to make sure the path is clear." My breath hitched. She didn't just want me gone from the dinner table. She wanted me gone from the equation entirely. I looked at the fire, which had died down to a dull red glow. The war wasn't over. I had won the battle for the house, but I had just discovered the blueprint for the entire invasion. I reached for the phone again. I didn't call Marilyn. I didn't call Grant. I called Walter. It was 1 a.m. He answered on the second ring. "You opened it," Walter said. It wasn't a question. "She was going to sell it," I whispered. "She was going to sell the lodge the second Grandma died." "Yes," Walter said. "And she was going to use the proceeds to fund Grant's debts. That is why she needed you out of the picture. Juno. That is why she needed you to be the estranged daughter. Estranged daughters don't get asked questions during probate." I gripped the paper. The anger that rose in me now was different. It wasn't the hot, tearful anger of a rejected child. It was the cold, hard fury of a financial manager who has just discovered embezzlement. "Walter," I said, "when is the next family meeting? The one regarding the rest of the will?" "January 5th, Walter said. "Marilyn has called a summit to discuss the injustice of the estate." "Good," I said. "I'll be there." "Juno," Walter warned. "You have the house. You have the win. Why go back into the mud?" "Because," I said, looking at the evidence in my lap, "I don't just want them off my property. Walter, I want them out of my grandmother's legacy. I am going to finish the audit." The envelope from my grandmother sat on the coffee table like an unexploded ordnance. The fire in the grate had turned to ash, and the silence of the lodge was no longer peaceful. It was heavy with the weight of what I was about to read. Walter had told me to wait. He had told me that Evelyn was specific about the timing. "Open when the house is yours, and the truth is theirs." I slid the contents out. The paper was old, slightly yellowed at the edges. There were 3 distinct items. The first was a letter in Evelyn's handwriting, addressed to Marilyn but never mailed. The second was a spiral-bound notebook. The third was a stack of printed emails, stapled together with a rusted clip. I picked up the letter first. It was dated 5 years ago. Marilyn, I am writing this because I am a coward. I cannot say these things to your face because you have a way of twisting my words until I am the one apologizing. But I see you. I see how you look at the lodge. You do not look at it as a home. You look at it as a portfolio asset. I heard you on the phone last week. I was in the other room, and you thought I was asleep. I heard you telling Grant that as soon as the old bat kicks the bucket, you would list the property. You said the market was hot. You said the proceeds would cover the debts you two have racked up living a life you cannot afford. You call this place a tradition, but to you, it is just a piggy bank waiting to be smashed. You are not waiting for Christmas. Marilyn, you are waiting for my funeral. I will not let you sell my memories to pay for your mistakes, and I will not let you erase Juno. I know why you keep her away. It is not because she is busy. It is because if she is here, you have to admit that you are flawed. You have to admit that you abandoned a part of yourself. I am changing my will. You will get the house in town, which is all you deserve. But the lodge? The lodge goes to the one person who never asked me for a dime. I lowered the letter. My hands were cold. I had always assumed Marilyn's obsession with the lodge was about status. I thought she wanted the perfect Christmas photo to prove she was a good mother. But it was darker than that. The renovation, the expensive appliances, the obsessive maintenance. It wasn't about love. It was about staging a house for sale. She was investing $30,000 in a kitchen not to cook turkeys, but to bump the asking price by $50,000. She was flipping my inheritance before I even received it. I picked up the notebook next. It was a ledger of sorts. Evelyn had tracked loans to Marilyn over the last decade. June 2018. $10,000 for Tessa's tuition. Later found out it was for a cruise. December 2019. $5,000 for emergency repairs on the suburban house. No contractor ever came. August 2021. $15,000 for Grant's business venture. The total was staggering. Over $200,000 in 10 years. Marilyn had been bleeding her mother dry while simultaneously excluding her mother's other granddaughter. But it was the third item, the stack of emails, that made the bile rise in my throat. These were printouts from an old Yahoo email account. My grandmother must have had access to the family computer, or perhaps Marilyn had foolishly left her account logged in during a visit. The top email was dated 7 years ago. The subject line was, Holiday Logistics / the Juno Situation. It was sent by Marilyn. The recipients were not just Grant and Tessa. The recipients were Aunt Sarah, Uncle Robert, Cousin Becky, the entire inner circle of the Banks family. Hi everyone, just finalizing the head count for the lodge this year. I wanted to touch base regarding Juno. I know some of you asked if we should invite her this year since it is a big anniversary, but honestly, I think it is best for everyone if we keep the circle tight. Juno has a way of bringing the mood down. She is very intense, and to be frank, her presence makes Grant uncomfortable. It ruins the aesthetic of the week. We want a happy, cohesive vibe, and she just doesn't fit the brand we are going for. So, if she reaches out to any of you, please just tell her we are doing a nuclear family-only thing, or that the beds are full. We need to be on the same page. No rogue invitations. It just confuses things. Love, Marilyn. I read the replies. Uncle Robert. Got it. No worries. We want a stress-free week. Aunt Sarah. Agreed. She is a bit of a downer. We will stick to the script. Cousin Becky. I will make sure the kids don't tag her in any photos so she doesn't see what she is missing. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. For 15 years. I had thought the extended family was innocent. I thought they were just oblivious bystanders, swept up in Marilyn's orbit. I thought they didn't know I wanted to come, but they knew. They all knew. They had held a digital conference about my exclusion. They had agreed, in writing, to lie to me. They had coordinated their excuses. The beds are full. Nuclear family only. These weren't random rejections. They were scripted lines from a screenplay Marilyn had distributed. Becky, who had texted me yesterday calling me sick, had actively participated in hiding photos from me 7 years ago. Robert, who told me to be the bigger person, had agreed that I ruined the aesthetic. I wasn't just fighting my mother, I was fighting a syndicate. I sat there until the sun came up. I didn't sleep, I didn't eat. I just read the documents over and over, memorizing the dates, the names, the betrayals. By the time the sun hit the lake, turning the water into blinding gold, I knew exactly what I had to do. I called Walter Price at 8 in the morning. I read them, I said. My voice was raspy. I know, Walter said. Are you okay? No, I said. I am angry, and I am ready. Good, Walter said. Because your mother has made her move. She has hired a lawyer, a man named Stevenson from Atlanta. He is loud, expensive, and specializes in contesting wills based on diminished capacity. They are filing an emergency motion to freeze the assets of the trust, claiming you manipulated Evelyn while she was in cognitive decline. Let them file, I said. Evelyn's mental evaluation is on video. They will lose. They know they will lose eventually, Walter said. But Stevenson's strategy is to make it so painful in public that you settle just to make it go away. They want a payout. Juno, they want you to buy them off. I am not buying them off, I said. I am not giving them a single cent. Marilyn has called a family meeting, Walter continued. January 5th. She has summoned everyone, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, to her house in the suburbs. She plans to present her case to the family court of public opinion. She is going to paint you as the predator who preyed on a dying grandmother. She wants a meeting? I asked. Yes, to rally the troops. Fine, I said. Tell her I agree to the meeting, but not at her house. Where do you want it? Here, I said. At the lodge. Walter paused. Juno, that is hostile territory, or rather, it is your territory, but inviting them back in, are you sure? I am sure, I said. If they want to talk about the legacy of this family, we are going to do it in the house that paid for it. Tell Stevenson that if they want a settlement discussion, it happens at 42 Evergreen Drive, or it doesn't happen at all. They will bring the whole circus, Walter warned. I am counting on it, I said. The next week was a blur of preparation. I returned to Knoxville, but only to pack more clothes and to print documents. I went to the office, but my mind was entirely on the audit. I treated the upcoming meeting not as a family reunion, but as a corporate trial. I organized my evidence into binders. Binder 1, the financials. This contained the receipts for the renovation, the wolf range, the floors, the contractor invoices Marilyn had signed. It also contained the text of the waiver she signed, donating the improvements to the landlord. This proved she treated the property as her own. Yes, but it also proved she was reckless with money that wasn't hers, money she planned to recoup by selling my inheritance. Binder 2. The conspiracy. This was the email chain. I printed a copy for every single person who was on the thread. I wanted Robert to hold his own words in his hands. I wanted Sarah to read her own betrayal. Binder 3. The intent. This was Evelyn's letter and the notebook. This was the motive. I also hired security. I called Mike, the guy who installed the locks. I need a team for January 5th. I told him. 4 guys, suits, not uniforms. I want them at the gate and at the front door. Nobody gets in unless they are on the list, and nobody destroys property when they get upset. You expecting a riot? Mike asked. I am expecting a tantrum, I said. January 5th arrived. It was a Monday. The sky was gray and heavy with the threat of snow. I arrived at the lodge at 8 in the morning. I set up the great room. I moved the furniture. I took away the comfortable circle of sofas where they used to drink cocoa. I set up a long table, the dining table, facing the fireplace. I placed a single chair at the head of the table. That was for me. I placed 2 chairs at the opposite end. for Marilyn and her lawyer. I placed rows of folding chairs along the sides for the jury, the relatives. At 10 o'clock, the cars began to arrive. Marilyn arrived in a different car this time, a rented luxury sedan, likely to impress the lawyer. She stepped out wearing black, looking like a grieving widow, though her husband was very much alive and walking 2 steps behind her. Looking miserable. The lawyer, Stevenson, was a short man with a tan that looked like it came from a bottle and a suit that was too shiny. He carried a briefcase like a weapon. Then came the rest. Robert, Sarah, Becky, the whole cast of characters who had blown up my phone with insults. They walked up the driveway looking nervous. They knew the locks had been changed. They knew they were walking into the lion's den. Mike and his security team checked them in at the door. "Name?" Mike asked, holding a clipboard. "Robert Banks," my uncle said, indignant. "I am her uncle." "You're on the list," Mike said, stepping aside. "Keep your phone in your pocket. No recording allowed." They filed into the great room. They looked around at the space they had been evicted from 2 weeks ago. It looked different. Without their clutter, without their decorations, it looked austere. It looked like a courtroom. I stood by the fireplace. I was wearing a charcoal gray suit. I didn't look festive. I looked expensive. Marilyn marched to the front of the room. She didn't look at me. She looked at the room, asserting her dominance. "This is ridiculous," she announced to the room, "dragging us all out here in the cold. We should be handling this in a law office. This is the subject of the dispute, Mrs. Banks," Stevenson said, his voice oily. "It is fitting to be on site." He looked at me. "Ms. Banks, I am Arthur Stevenson. I represent your mother." "I know who you are," I said. "You can sit there." I pointed to the chair at the far end of the table. Walter Price stood next to me. He was the silent anchor, the heavy artillery I didn't need to fire yet. Marilyn sat down. She smoothed her skirt. She looked at the gathered family members, offering them a sad, brave smile. "I want to thank you all for coming," she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "I know the last few weeks have been traumatic. For all of us. To be thrown out of our family home, it was a shock." She turned to look at me. "But I am here to offer a solution," she said. "I am here to fix this mistake. We all know that Mother was not in her right mind at the end. We know that she would never have wanted to split this family apart. She valued tradition above all else." "Tradition," I repeated. The word tasted like copper. "Yes, tradition," Marilyn said, gaining confidence. "And that is why we are challenging the will, not for the money, Juno, but to restore the natural order. This lodge belongs to the family. It belongs to the memory of the Banks legacy." Stevenson opened his briefcase. "We have statements from 3 doctors testifying to the typical cognitive decline of an 89-year-old. We have witnesses," he gestured to the room, "who can testify that you were estranged from the deceased and the family for over a decade, making your sudden inheritance highly suspicious. We are prepared to argue undue influence." "You want to talk about estrangement?" I asked. "We want to talk about fairness," Stevenson said. "We are proposing a settlement. You surrender the deed to the trust, to be managed by Marilyn Banks. In exchange, the estate will pay you a lump sum of $50,000 for your trouble." A ripple went through the room. $50,000. To them, it sounded like a lot. To me, it was an insult. $50,000, I said flatly. "For a property worth $2 million. It is a fair offer considering the vulnerability of your legal position," Stevenson said with a smirk. I looked at the relatives. They were nodding. They wanted this to be over. They wanted the happy ending where Marilyn won. I got some cash, and they could go back to pretending I didn't exist. "I have a counteroffer," I said. I picked up the first binder. "But before I make it," I said, "we need to clarify a few things about this legacy you are so desperate to protect." I opened the binder. I pulled out the emails. "Marilyn claims I was estranged," I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. "She claims I chose not to be here. She claims I was working or skiing." I walked over to Aunt Sarah. I handed her a piece of paper. "Read the highlighted section." "Sarah," I said. Sarah looked at the paper. Her face went pale. "Read it," I commanded. "It says, Juno has a way of bringing the mood down," Sarah whispered. "It says, no rogue invitations." "And who sent that?" I asked. "Marilyn," she said. "And what did you reply?" Sarah swallowed hard. I said, "Agreed. She is a downer." The room went deadly silent. I walked to Uncle Robert. I handed him his sheet. "You said, 'No worries. We want a stress-free week.'" I quoted before he even looked at it. "You agreed to lie to me, Robert. You agreed to tell me the beds were full." I turned back to the room. "This isn't estrangement," I said. "This is a conspiracy. You didn't lose me. You discarded me. You have an email chain going back 7 years where you coordinated my exclusion like you were planning a military operation." Marilyn stood up. "This is irrelevant. Private emails have nothing to do with the validity of a will." "They have everything to do with your credibility," I said. "You stood in front of this family 2 weeks ago and cried about how much you missed me. But here you are, in black and white, calling me a brand risk to your aesthetic." I went back to the table. I picked up the second document, the waiver for the renovation. "And let's talk about the lodge," I said. "You say you want to protect the tradition. You say this place is sacred." I held up the invoice for the Wolf Range. "Then why?" I asked. "Did you spend $30,000 of your own money upgrading a kitchen in a rental property?" "Because we loved it," Marilyn shouted. "Because we wanted it to be nice." "No," I said. "You did it because you were planning to flip it." I pulled out Evelyn's letter. I didn't read the whole thing. I just read the paragraph about the sale. "I heard you telling Grant that as soon as the old bat kicks the bucket, you would list the property. You said the proceeds would cover the debts." I looked at Grant. He was staring at his hands. He knew. He had always known about the debts. "You weren't fighting for a tradition, Mother," I said. "You were fighting for a payday. You needed this house to bail you out. That's why you are suing me. You are broke." The word hung there. Broke. Marilyn's face twisted. It was the face of a person whose social armor had been stripped away completely. "That is a lie," she shrieked. "We are fine. We are successful." "Show them the bank statements." "Marilyn," I said. "Because I have the notebook where Grandma recorded every loan she gave you. $200,000 in 10 years. You were living off her. And you planned to cannibalize her estate the moment she was cold in the ground." I turned to the family. "This is who you are following," I said. "You are following a woman who lied to you about me, who lied to you about her finances, and who planned to sell this sacred venue the minute she got the deed. If she had inherited this place, there would be no Christmas next year. There would be a sold sign on the gate." The room was buzzing now. The relatives were whispering, looking at Marilyn with new eyes. The narrative of the greedy daughter was dissolving, replaced by the image of the parasitic mother, Stevenson. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. He closed his briefcase. This was not the slam-dunk settlement he had been promised. "Now," I said, placing my hands on the table. "Here is my counteroffer." I looked at Marilyn. She was shaking. "I will not pay you $50,000, I said. "I will not pay you anything, but I will offer you this. I will not countersue you for the malicious improvements you made to my property without a valid long-term lease. I will not publish these emails to your Charity League friends, and I will not evict you from the suburban house yet." Marilyn looked up. "Yet? The trust owns the note on your house, too." Walter Price spoke up for the first time. "Evelyn bought the mortgage 3 years ago when you fell behind. Did you forget that?" Marilyn slumped into her chair. She had forgotten, or she had hoped I wouldn't find out. "You live in a house owned by the estate," I said. "My estate. So here's the deal. You drop this lawsuit. You drop the claim of undue influence. You admit, on the record, that the will is valid." "And if I don't?" Marilyn whispered. "Then I foreclose." I said. And I release every single one of these emails to the local paper. I will burn your reputation to the ground. Mother, I will make sure everyone in Knoxville knows exactly what kind of woman you are. I leaned forward. You wanted a show, I said. You wanted a public forum. Well, here it is. Decide, right now. Marilyn looked at Stevenson. He shook his head slightly. He knew when he was beaten. She looked at Grant. He was crying silently. She looked at the family. They were looking back at her with judgment, with pity, with disgust. She had lost the room. She had lost the house. She had lost the war. Fine, she whispered. I can't hear you, I said. Fine, she screamed, slamming her hand on the table. Keep it. Keep the damn house. I don't want it anyway. It's cursed. You are cursed. She stood up. Knocking her chair over, she grabbed her purse. She didn't wait for Grant. She didn't wait for her lawyer. She marched out of the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor she had paid to refinish. The door slammed shut behind her. The silence that followed was different than before. It wasn't tense. It was final. I looked at the stunned relatives. The meeting is adjourned, I said. Please see yourselves out. Mike will escort you to the gate. I sat down in the chair at the head of the table. I watched them leave, one by one. Aunt Sarah wouldn't meet my eyes. Uncle Robert looked like he wanted to say something, but thought better of it. Grant was the last to leave. He stopped at the door. He looked at me, then at the empty chair where Marilyn had sat. She never told me she planned to sell it, he said softly. She lied to everyone. Grant, I said. That was her only real talent. He nodded. He looked older than I had ever seen him. He walked out into the cold. I was alone again. I looked at the binders. I looked at the empty chairs. I had dissected the lie. I had exposed the rot. The stage was cleared. Now, I just had to decide what to build on top of it. The sun on the morning of January 5th did not bring warmth. It brought a harsh, interrogating light that exposed every dust mote in the air. I stood at the head of the long mahogany dining table in the great room of Evergreen Harbor Lodge. This was the table where, for 15 years, they had carved turkeys and toasted to their own perfection. Today, there was no food on the table. There was only a pitcher of water, a stack of legal binders, and a silence so thick it felt like pressure in the ears. Walter Price sat to my right, his face impassive, his hands folded over a notepad. He was the silent witness. I was the executioner. At 10 o'clock sharp, the cars began to pull up. I watched them from the window. They moved slower this time. There was no festive energy, no rushing to claim bedrooms. They walked toward the front door with the hesitant, shuffling gait of people walking into a funeral. Marilyn entered last. She was wearing a structured black suit and oversized sunglasses. Despite the overcast sky, she walked into the foyer with her chin held high, clutching her handbag like a shield. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on the chair at the head of the table, the seat she had occupied for a decade and a half, the seat of the matriarch. She began to walk toward it. It was muscle memory. It was an assumption of power that ran so deep she didn't even notice she was doing it. Not there, I said. My voice was not loud, but it stopped her mid-step. Marilyn froze. She looked at the chair, then at me. Excuse me? She said, offering a tight, strained smile. Juno, dear, let's not be petty about seating arrangements. We have a lot to discuss. We do, I said, but that chair is for the owner of the property. And since you are here as a guest with a revoked license, you will sit there. I pointed to a wooden chair on the side, facing the window. It was not the head of the table. It was not even part of the main setting. It was an observer's seat. Marilyn's smile faltered. For a split second, the rage flared behind her eyes, hot and familiar, but she swallowed it. She knew she was on thin ice. She walked stiffly to the side chair and sat down, smoothing her skirt with aggressive, jerky movements. Grant sat next to her. He looked gray. He didn't look at me. Tessa took a seat further down. pulling her coat tight around herself as if she were freezing. "Let's begin," I said. Marilyn cleared her throat. She clasped her hands on the table. Leaning forward in a pose that simulated reasonableness, "Juno," she began, her voice pitching into that sweet, persuasive register she used on charity boards. "I have been doing a lot of thinking since the incident on Christmas Eve, and I think we have all let our emotions get the better of us. We are a family. Families fight, yes, but they also forgive." She looked around the room at the aunts and uncles, gathering her audience. "I have a proposal," she continued. "I am willing to overlook the harshness of your actions. I am willing to drop the lawsuit regarding the validity of the will. In exchange, we simply ask for a shared usage agreement. We want to secure the Christmas week for the family, in perpetuity, and perhaps a small management role for myself to help you run the estate. It is a fair compromise. We don't want to shut you out. Juno, we want to bring you in. Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word hung in the air. It was her favorite weapon. If I didn't give her what she wanted, I was selfish. If I had needs, I was selfish. I didn't answer her immediately. I reached for the remote control on the table. I had set up a projector screen in front of the fireplace. "You want to talk about shutting people out," I said, "and you want to talk about who is selfish. Let's look at the data." I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life, projected in high definition. 5 feet tall, was an email. It was the email I had found in Evelyn's safe. Subject: Holiday Logistics / the Juno Situation. From Marilyn Banks. Date: November 12, 2018. I read the highlighted sentence aloud, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Please do not add Juno to the group chat this year. She has a way of ruining the vibe. We want a happy, cohesive aesthetic, and she just doesn't fit the brand we are going for." I looked at the room. "The brand," I repeated. "You didn't exclude me because I was busy. You didn't exclude me because of a misunderstanding. You excluded me because I ruined your brand." Marilyn's face went white. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "That was taken out of context," she stammered. "I meant that you seemed unhappy. I was trying to protect you from feeling out of place." "Protect me?" I asked. I clicked the remote again. A new slide appeared. It was a reply from Aunt Sarah. "Agreed. She is a downer. We will stick to the script." I looked at Aunt Sarah, who was sitting in the second row. She gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. She looked down at her lap, unable to meet my eyes. The people in the room who had spent weeks telling me they didn't know and that they were confused were suddenly very interested in the pattern of the floorboards. The room was deathly silent. The shame was palpable. It wasn't just Marilyn. I had indicted the entire collaborative system of my erasure. "You all knew," I said. "You all agreed to the script. You let a 20-year-old girl think she was unlovable because it was more convenient for your vacation plans." Marilyn slammed her hand on the table. "Enough! This is the past. We are talking about the future. You are holding this house hostage because of some old emails? That is petty. Juno, it is beneath you." "I am not holding the house hostage," I said. "I am reclaiming it. And speaking of reclaiming," I signaled to Walter. He slid a folder across the table toward Marilyn. "These are the invoices," I said. "For the renovation you did this year, $30,000 for a kitchen you don't own." "I gifted that to the house," Marilyn argued. "It shows how much I care." "No," I said. "It shows how much you assumed. You spent that money because you thought you were going to sell this place and pocket the profit. But here is the reality check." "Mother, you are broke," Marilyn stiffened. "I am not." "You are," I cut her off. "I have the notebook. I know about the loans from Grandma. I know about the second mortgage on the suburban house. And I know that the trust, my trust, now holds the note on that mortgage." I leaned forward. "So here's the situation," I said. "I am not going to share the lodge with you. I am not going to give you Christmas, but I am going to send a contractor to your house in the suburbs next week." Marilyn blinked. "Why?" "To inspect the property. I said coldly. As the mortgage holder, I need to ensure my asset is being maintained. If I find it is not up to code, or if you miss a single payment, I will foreclose. You will not just lose the lodge, Marilyn, you will lose your actual home. Marilyn looked at me with genuine terror. For the first time, she realized the extent of the power shift. She wasn't dealing with a hurt daughter anymore. She was dealing with a landlord. You wouldn't, she whispered. I am your mother. And I was your daughter, I said. That didn't stop you. Suddenly, the chair next to Marilyn scraped loudly against the floor. Grant stood up. Grant, the man who had blended into the beige wallpaper for 15 years. Grant, who never raised his voice. He stood up, his hands trembling by his sides. Sit down, Grant, Marilyn hissed, not looking at him. No, Grant said. His voice was shaking, but it was loud. No, Marilyn, I will not sit down. He turned to look at me. His eyes were red-rimmed behind his glasses. He looked exhausted, like a man who had been carrying a heavy weight for miles and finally decided to drop it. Juno, he said. He choked on the words. He took a breath and tried again. I am sorry, he said. I know that word doesn't mean much coming from me. I know I was the nice one. I let you think I was on your side, but I wasn't. I was a coward. The room was silent. Marilyn stared at her husband as if he had grown a second head. I saw what she was doing, Grant said, gesturing to Marilyn. I saw the texts she didn't send. I saw her delete your messages, and I let her do it. I let her do it because it was easier than fighting her. I chose a quiet life over a righteous one. And I let you pay the price for my peace. He looked at the floor, shame coloring his face. I failed you, he said. I failed as a stepfather, and I failed as a man. You are right to lock us out. We don't deserve to be here. Grant, Marilyn shrieked. Stop it. You are making us look weak. We are weak. Marilyn, Grant shouted back, his voice cracking. We are weak, small people. Look at us. We are fighting a war against our own daughter over a vacation house. It's pathetic. Then, from the other end of the table, a sob broke out. Tessa was crying. She wasn't crying the pretty, photogenic tears she used for her social media. She was ugly crying, her face buried in her hands. She looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. She looked at the photos on the wall, the photos I had left up. The shrine to the perfect family. It's all fake, Tessa whispered. My whole life it's all fake. She turned to Marilyn. You told me she hated me, Tessa said, her voice rising to a wail. You told me Juno was jealous of me. You told me she wanted to ruin my Christmas, but she didn't. You did? I did it for you, Tessa, Marilyn pleaded. I wanted you to have a perfect childhood. You didn't give me a perfect childhood, Tessa said. You gave me a lie. Every time we sat at this table, every time we took a picture, it was built on her empty chair. My happiness was stolen from her. How am I supposed to live with that? How am I supposed to look at these photos and not feel sick? Marilyn was cornered. Her husband had turned. Her golden child had turned. The audience of relatives was looking at her with disgust. She had no moves left, no money, no status, no allies. So she did the only thing she had left. She lashed out. It's because you look like him. Marilyn screamed it. She stood up, knocking her chair over. The mask was gone completely now. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated resentment. You look exactly like him, she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. Your father, that drunk, that loser. Every time you walk into a room, it's like seeing his ghost. It's like seeing the biggest mistake of my life walking around, breathing, judging me. She was panting, her chest heaving. He broke me, she cried. He made me feel small. And you have his eyes, you have his voice, you have his stubbornness. I couldn't have that at my table. I couldn't look at you and feel safe. You make me hurt. The room was paralyzed. She had finally admitted it. The vibe, the brand, the scheduling conflicts. It was all just a cover for a mother who couldn't separate her child from her trauma. I looked at her. I didn't feel the sting I expected. I didn't feel the crushing weight of rejection. I felt clarity. I walked slowly around the table until I was standing right in front of her. I was taller than her now, stronger. "I am not my father," I said. My voice was low, calm, and final. "I am Juno. I am the person who waited by the phone. I am the person who drove 3 hours to see you. I am the person who loved you despite everything." I looked her in the eye. "Your pain is real." "Mother," I said, "but your pain is not a license to erase me. You don't get to destroy a human being just because they remind you of a bad memory." Marilyn stared at me, her breathing ragged. She looked small. She looked empty. I turned to the rest of the room. "The meeting is over," I announced. "Here is my decision." I placed my hand on the table. "I am not selling the lodge. I am not sharing the lodge. I am keeping it." I looked at Walter. "Walter, please draw up the papers. This venue will no longer be a private vacation home for the Banks family. Starting next month, I am registering it as a retreat center. It will be a place for women who are rebuilding their lives. It will be a place for community events. It will be a place that actually generates good in the world, instead of hoarding it for a few people who don't appreciate it." I looked back at Marilyn. "And as for the family tradition," I said, "it ends today. From now on, the doors of Evergreen Harbor Lodge are open to anyone I choose, and the only people who get to sit at this table are the people who know how to love without conditions." "You can't do that," Marilyn whispered. "You are destroying the family." "No," I said. "I am saving myself from it." I pointed to the door. "Please leave my property," I said. "And Marilyn, expect the inspector at your house on Monday. Make sure the gutters are clean." Marilyn didn't move for a long moment. Then, with a sob of pure defeat, she turned and ran. She ran out of the great room, out of the foyer, and out into the cold gray morning. Grant lingered for a second. He looked at me, gave a small, sad nod, and followed her. Tessa sat there for a minute longer. She wiped her eyes. She stood up and walked over to me. She didn't hug me. We weren't there yet. But she looked at me with clear eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know," I said. "Drive safe, Tessa." She left. The relatives filed out silently. No one argued. No one called me selfish. They just walked away, carrying the heavy weight of the truth. When the last car had pulled away, I walked to the front door. I locked it. I turned back to the great room. It was empty. The photos of the perfect family were still on the mantel. I walked over to the fireplace. I took down the silver frame of the trio: Marilyn, Grant, and Tessa. I placed it face down in a drawer. Then I looked at the small black and white photo of me and Evelyn. "We did it. Grandma," I whispered. I walked to the window and looked out at the lake. The water was still. The air was quiet. I was alone in a house that slept 16 people. But for the first time in 15 years, the house didn't feel too big. It felt like enough. It felt like mine. The family I had been begging to join was gone. But looking at the empty room, ready to be filled with new people, new stories, and new laughter, I realized something. I hadn't lost a family. I had finally found my freedom. That is the story of how I bought the stage to cancel the show. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that wooden stool in the corner to the head of the table, and I'm glad you were here to see it. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a cozy room in London, a busy street in New York, or maybe a quiet corner in Sydney? Please comment down below with your location. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served, please do me a huge favor. Subscribe to the Emma Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, remember, Sometimes the best revenge is just changing the locks.